The story started with Lin Yuan, who to everyone else looked like a rookie, weak, forgettable, alone. Then he summoned countless undead and rewrote the laws of combat. The ones who laughed, they didn't even get time to scream. In the immortal world, across the wind-swept gravel desert near Black Sand Town, a party sprinted through the sand, loud enough to startle a desert lizard into scrambling away. They urged each other to move faster, voices edged with panic. Ghost desert wolves were right behind them, and they knew it. Their shouts for help carried across the dunes, desperate for someone, anyone, to intervene. The priestess muttered about their awful luck, since they only came to fight level 1 sand scorpions, then threw a pointed look at the warrior, the group's leader, demanding to know how this even happened, and what the plan was now. The warrior told them to hang on just a bit more, since a clump of rock acacia trees was up ahead, and ghost desert wolves couldn't climb. So if they could scale them, there might be a sliver of hope left. Still, she cursed inwardly, knowing ghost desert wolves were brutal creatures that never abandoned marked prey. They were already banged up from the last fight, and the only 2 pieces of black iron gear they had left had just broken, so she couldn't help but wonder if this really was where they'd die. Then the sorceress screamed as her foot caught, and she slammed into the sand face first. The warrior and the priestess immediately panicked for her. They shouted for her to stay alert, but her eyes snapped wide when the wolves closed in, her body frozen while the lead wolf's image burned itself into her gaze. In the next instant, a blade came out of nowhere, slamming into the wolf's neck and dropping it dead. Lin Yuan stepped into view, walking calmly to face the rest. His cloak hung heavy around him, making him look like a wandering NPC with a side quest nobody asked for. The sorceress stared at him, trying to figure out if he had really saved her. Her eyes darted to his status. He was only level 1. The idea made her blink in disbelief. Just a beginner. The other wolves turned on him now, growling low. He scoffed, brushing off level 3 strength like it wasn't worth the effort. As the wolves lunged, he pulled out his sword. He launched straight into them without flinching. They pounced, jaws wide, but he cut through them mid-air in a single clean motion. The arc of his sword flashed with a lightning aura, crackling with raw force. The women just stared, struggling to process what they'd seen. He stood over the dead wolves like it wasn't even a warm-up. The warrior couldn't believe it. He took out 4 ghost desert wolves, using nothing but a plain beginner's iron sword. Then the sorceress pointed out the obvious problem. More wolves had arrived. It was a whole pack now, no mistaking it. The priestess demanded to know where they all came from, and the sorceress guessed that the scent of blood probably called every nearby ghost desert wolf like it was a dinner bell. The warrior told Lin Yuan to run, warning that a pack like that could flatten an entire beginner village and he'd be shredded if he didn't back off. He just asked if she really meant that. Then he summoned his cards. The system prompted him, checking if he truly wanted to summon skeleton warriors. He confirmed. He flung the cards into the sand. They stabbed into the ground and activated a glowing magic circle. A skeletal hand burst through the dirt, followed by more. Level 3 skeleton warriors started crawling out into the open. The wolves didn't care. They charged forward anyway, just as bloodthirsty. Lin Yuan told them to find out who'd actually get torn apart. The skeleton warriors' eyes flared to life. They pulled the wolves aggro, while Lin Yuan cut them down from behind. 15 minutes later, Lin Yuan jammed his sword into the final wolf's neck. He yanked the blade out without flinching. The system pinged him with a pat on the back, marking 16 ghost desert wolves down and handing over 160 experience points. Along with that, he scooped up 28 ghostly desert wolf fangs for good measure. Out of nowhere, the wolves' life orbs drifted free from their corpses. They drifted toward Lin Yuan and spun lazily around him. The priestess glanced over at the warrior, half convinced she was dreaming, after watching him take down 16 ghostly desert wolves solo. The sorceress suddenly stepped forward, wondering aloud if he was a mage, and if that thing he pulled off counted as summoning, tossing in the fact that she was a mage too, and she'd never seen anything like that before. But he cut in to ask who told her he was a mage. That got her asking what kind of ability he had. He just grinned without answering. After all, the power he held was something off limits, tied to an SSS ranked talent. He was a soul reaper. He came from the Blue Star, and he'd been given a second shot at life. 3 years earlier, scientists picked up a massive and unknown celestial object named the Demon Star that suddenly parked itself near the Blue Star. 3 months after that, some shady megacorporation dropped a full-dive VR game called Eternal World that blew past every bit of tech the Blue Star had ever dreamed of. Once people got inside Eternal World, using their shiny new VR headsets, they started getting random powers. And by grinding levels, they could take on monsters inside the game. At first, nobody really batted an eye since it looked like just another game, until some players in the real world started showing up with abilities they'd earned inside and got labeled the Chosen Ones. That's when a group claiming to serve the Demon Star's ruler crawled out of the game into real life and went full apocalypse mode on humanity. Everything collapsed. His parents didn't make it past the early days of that bloodbath. The world scrambled to pull together every chosen one it could find, but they got steamrolled by the invaders and had to fall back. He went down swinging in that final battle too. What he never saw coming was waking up again, back at the exact moment he'd first logged into Eternal World. Right then, the system handed him a forbidden ability tied to SSS rank talents: Dark, Summoning Art, and Netherworld Gate. Back in the now, he figured that this time around, he had to grind fast and get strong enough to shield his family and defend the Blue Star. He dropped to a knee beside one of the fallen wolves. He reached out an arm. His dark aura flowed straight into the corpse. Moments later, all the wolves' bodies were blanketed in his dark energy. The system chimed in to ask whether he wanted to activate Dark Summoning Art on the ghostly desert wolf corpses. He confirmed. That ability's biggest flex was giving him a warrior tier physique, while letting him use Dark Summoning Art to turn fallen monsters into undead that fought under his command. The revived undead didn't just keep their levels and skills from before, they also gained a new passive called Undying Body, which made them shrug off some combat debuffs. He followed it up by tapping into his other talent, Netherworld Gate. That one let him store the monsters reanimated through Dark Summoning Art, and its storage would expand as he leveled up. The Netherworld Gate opened. The wolves vanished into it. He explained that once his level was high enough, he'd be marching around with an undead army that nothing could stand against. The warrior tried to make sense of it, asking whether he had actually brought the dead back as undead and wondering who in the world he was. Instead of giving her anything clear, he noted that by now, it should already be starting. The system broadcast a warning that the world boss, Giant Deathwolf, was about to descend into the gravel desert. He announced that it was boss hunting time. Not far off, other teams huddled behind rock outcrops as eerie lightning slashed across the sky. Then, the heavens cracked wide open. Red eyes stared through the rift. One guy muttered that the Giant Deathwolf was here. Another remembered reading on the official site that its attack range was 50 meters and shouted that they needed to run for it, while someone else completely lost it and screamed for help. Everyone scattered in panic. Agonized shrieks ripped through the air. Two guys still hiding behind rocks stared in frozen disbelief. The Giant Deathwolf had landed, jaws already closed around a whole human. It was level 6, and it tore through people like nothing. One of the men called out for his brother, while another shot him a look like he'd lost it and pointed out that there's no way a single player could take down the Giant Deathwolf, so if he marched out to fight it, he'd just end up dead. Another piped up and wondered if that thing was actually the world boss, and if taking down something that horrifying was even in the realm of possibility. All of a sudden, one of his companions nudged him and told him to look, then questioned what that guy even planned to do. Lin Yuan was walking towards them all by himself. He moved without a hint of hesitation. His eyes locked ahead with a look that could cut steel. Someone pointed out that he should check out that sword, and added that the guy even looked like a total rookie, which the other confirmed before reminding him that the Giant Deathwolf was a level 6 Lord rank monster, and if backup didn't show up, they were completely outmatched even if they teamed up. In the world of immortality, monsters were ranked from weakest to strongest as normal rank, elite rank, boss rank, lord rank, king rank, overlord rank, and tyrant rank. Among those, lord rank monsters might have been the lowest tier of world bosses, but for beginners, they were still full-on death traps. Without warning, Lin Yuan stopped. Everyone stared as he came to a halt right in front of the Giant Deathwolf. Someone shouted again, throwing out that he must be insane and needed to turn back now because taking that thing on was plain suicide. The Giant Deathwolf towered above Lin Yuan, but he calmly mentioned that now that he'd seen it, it didn't look all that strong. The wolf growled, blood leaking out of its mouth. It activated its skill, Evil Wolf's Roar. Lin Yuan ducked out of the way. The wolf fired off its Deathclaw next. Lin Yuan didn't even flinch, staring it down. He recalled that in his previous life, the level 6 Giant Deathwolf, being a lord, had a whopping 3,400 GP and a brutal 510 attack power. Back then, explorers in the gravel desert who hadn't passed level 3 had no shot except for coordinated group battles. And even then, he nearly got himself killed in one of those raids. But now, after being reborn and hacking his way through a mountain of brutal fights, his combat instincts had leveled up far past where they used to be. He locked in as the wolf's claw swung in. The claw slammed into the ground, smashing it apart. Lin Yuan dodged again with a smooth pivot to the side. One of the men exclaimed at how fast he was. The system flashed a warning that the world boss had entered a rage state. Lin Yuan grinned. He pressed a hand to the ground. He activated his talent, Netherworld Gate. The gate surged up from the earth. The wolf hesitated when it saw the gate form in front of it. The doors creaked open. Lin Yuan called out for his undead legion to charge. The ghostly desert wolves he'd defeated earlier burst through the gate. One guy shouted, trying to figure out what kind of weird portal that was. and another asked if those were undead, before recognizing that they really did look like ghostly desert wolves. And then a third asked how that kid managed to turn all those level 3 monsters into his undead troops. Lin Yuan figured that while heading over, he'd taken out monsters without a hitch and hit level 3, which expanded his Netherworld Gate storage to 30 slots. And even though that had slowed him down a little, the payoff wasn't bad at all. According to the aggro mechanics in Immortality, summoned creatures pulled less threat than their summoner. So when both showed up, the monster's first target would be the summoner, unless the summoned creatures struck first, which could then draw the boss's focus. The giant death wolf locked onto the undead wolves that swarmed it. One of the undead wolves roared at the giant death wolf. The giant death wolf raised its claw, ready to strike it down. Lin Yuan knew this was the perfect opening. He figured that if he pulled aggro just before the attack landed, he could keep his summoned creatures from taking heavy losses. He went in with a flurry of sword strikes. The wolf howled in pain. It spun and turned its attention on him, and he darted away. He reasoned that as long as the boss stayed focused on him, he could direct his undead to keep attacking and force the aggro to bounce back to them. Even weaklings could take down a giant, if there were enough of them, so it didn't matter that each undead ghostly wolf only landed 15 damage at a time. The giant death wolf's 3,400 GP was going to run out eventually. One of the men called it amazing, and another nodded, tagging it as a Lord-ranked world boss without missing a beat. Meanwhile, 3 thieves kept snickering to themselves like they'd already won something. A few minutes later, Lin Yuan sprang off the ground, charging at the boss without hesitation. It only had 500 GP left to its name. He drove his sword straight into its skull. That strike landed a critical hit. Blood burst from its head like a burst pipe. It hit the ground hard. Now stuck in a near-death state, it clung to 10 GP. Lin Yuan stared down at it, unbothered. Suddenly, the 3 thieves sprang into action. One pushed to take the chance and kill him so the treasure would be theirs. Another agreed fast and called for immediate action, while the last jumped in, reminding them that the kid's undead legion had been totally wiped out. Lin Yuan locked eyes on them, not amused. One of the men threw out a half-warning to stay alert. Lin Yuan didn't flinch, a sharp gleam flashing across his eyes as he turned to meet them. The thieves let out pained screams as one clean sword sweep flung them through the air. They hit the dirt at the same time, blood splashing out. Lin Yuan dismissed them as reckless fools, too blind to know their limits. One of the men tried to wrap his head around what just unfolded, while another realized Lin Yuan had dropped them in an instant. And the third recognized that those 3 level 3 thieves had been flattened, with just one hit. Meanwhile, the boss trembled while forcing itself upright. Lin Yuan hurled his sword at it next. Another critical landed. The system flashed the kill notice. The world boss, Giant Death Wolf, hit 0 HP, awarding him 480 EXP and 1 Pure Soul Gem. Lin Yuan mused over what kind of reward the very first world boss in the game might bring. A silver chest and the Pure Soul Gem materialized before him. The system explained the Pure Soul Gem held soul power, and once enough were collected, players could trade them at the Council of Immortality for legendary gear. He recalled that once players hit level 60, they needed to visit the Council of Immortality, home of the elf tribes, to continue leveling, though that part was still far off. And for now, Pure Soul Gems were the fastest ticket to legendary gear. In Immortality, equipment rankings from bottom to top went Common, Black Iron, Bronze, Silver, Gold, Dark Gold, Epic, Legendary, Mythical. Beginner players usually only held common gear, and rarely even touched Black Iron. 2 hours back, he'd used knowledge from his past life to send 2 skeleton warriors to drag away the elite Black Sand Lizards. That let him scoop up the bronze chest they guarded, which held the bronze-grade Black Lizard robe. The system then dropped a new notice, awarding him the title Monster Hunter for being the first player to slay a world boss, granting a 10% attack power boost, 10% crit rate, and a 15% bonus to magical damage when active. He figured that in the world of Immortality, stacked attributes and buffs like that from Monster Hunter were nothing to brush off. Another system message followed, handing him a silver treasure chest for being the first world boss killer. It came loaded with the Silver Moon Blade, the Eye of Death accessory, a healing potion, a level 1 skill scroll, and a beast essence. He figured the haul was solid, and the first world boss rewards were seriously generous. The system wrapped up the experience calculation and updated his player data. He figured it wasn't bad at all, jumping from early level 3 straight to nearly maxed level 4. And with 5 free attribute points per level, he planned to drop 3 into spiritual power and 2 into strength. Not a bad trade-off, considering his stats now topped everyone else's in the Gravel Desert. He also noticed the Netherworld Gate had 0 out of 40 monsters stored. He figured that even though all his Ghost Wolf undead had been sacrificed in the fight, leveling up had expanded the Netherworld Gate's capacity to hold 40 undead. Then the system asked if he wanted to use Dark Summoning on the Giant Dead Wolf's corpse. He confirmed. The wolf's eyes snapped open. It leapt back onto its feet like nothing had happened. It had become a giant zombie wolf. Lin Yuan figured it made sense for it to be the world boss, considering how many damage skills it had stacked along with solid crowd control, and once it switched into undead mode, it picked up Undead Body and the new addition, Undead Wrath, on top of that. And with that giant undead wolf backing him up, he'd be able to restock the undead army inside the gate of the Netherworld again, without much hassle. One of the men muttered that the whole thing was terrifying, and couldn't wrap his head around how he managed to turn the world boss into an undead pet. Another recalled that the gate had been spewing out undead wolf packs earlier too, and someone else pointed out that the guy was even scarier than the boss itself. Lin Yuan gave them a glance. They scattered behind rocks in a panic. He muttered that those rats were still hanging around. He remembered that when those 3 thieves got killed, they'd unexpectedly dropped a black iron level sword, which wasn't bad for beginners. But he already had the Silver Moon Blade in on him anyway. He went ahead and picked up the black iron sword. One guy whispered that he was heading straight for them with a sword. Someone else worried whether he was planning to off them for their loot too, and another mumbled about whether they even had a chance to get away. Out of nowhere, Lin Yuan turned to one of them and asked if he was the one who'd given him a heads up about the ambush earlier. The man stiffened and fumbled for words. Lin Yuan handed him the sword without hesitation. The man froze. Lin Yuan gave him a nod of thanks and said he might be able to make use of it. While the guy stood there with his brain short-circuiting, someone else barked that this couldn't be real and wondered whether he'd actually come over just to give them the sword, while another noticed that it was clearly a black iron weapon and worth tens of thousands of renminbi. 10 minutes later, Lin Yuan walked alone through the desert. His image flickered for a moment, and the sensation clicked instantly. The charge cut out. His VR headset shut off. He confirmed that the battery had run dry, and reality had kicked back in. He sat in his room, right in front of his computer. He reminded himself he had to start saving fast and get a gaming pod. The World of Immortality login screen glowed from his monitor. He reviewed how the game ran on ultra-realistic VR tech, with login zones split up by countries. On top of that, every login zone also branched into separate realms players could pick from, and his zone, Elbad, offered 4. Ancient Western Desert Kingdom, Returning Southern Empire, Dark Northern Empire, Tidal Archipelago. He recalled the moment the system asked him to choose a birthplace. Now that he had a second shot, he went for the same choice he made last time. He picked the ancient Western Desert Kingdom again, because, before everything went down, he'd stumbled across a secret. He remembered the chaos that tore through the world and the huge red eye burning in the sky. He'd been crushed under wreckage with blood soaking everything and people crying out around him. A cloak had suddenly whipped through the air. Lin Yuan's eyes had gone wide. 3 cloaked figures had floated silently beneath the red eye. Lin Yuan mulled over whether that gem was a yellow sapphire and whether it marked the emblem of the ancient Western Desert Kingdom's guild. He held the position as the first follower of the demonic star sovereign, and underneath all that, he was a human player. Lin Yuan recalled that the first follower played the keystone role in the final ritual to summon the evil sovereign to Blue Star. He mentioned he still had 3 years left before the evil sovereign's arrival, and if he managed to take him out within that window, there was a chance to stop the tragedy from repeating. That emblem stood as the only lead he had. Only the guilds based in the Western Desert's main city used yellow sapphires in their insignia, and with the level 10 entry requirement. If he planned to unmask that rat's identity, he needed to level up fast. That was right. He tried summoning his skeleton card and pulled it off. He questioned whether that meant he had actually summoned it. He explained that in Eternal World, there were players who, right after entering the camp, managed to bring game powers into the real world and use them. Those individuals were dubbed the Chosen, otherwise known as Children of Fate. Every Chosen had access to a powerful hidden class and a ridiculously high luck stat, and they served as the main force against the evil sovereign later on. He remembered how, in his past life, he only awakened his game character's powers in reality when the Blue Star catastrophe had already begun. And back then it came to him so easily that now, comparing that with the forbidden ability Soul Reaper, it became clear this one wasn't ordinary, though he still couldn't tell how it stacked against the Chosen's hidden professions. Suddenly, the sound of clattering echoed from outside his room. He immediately picked up on what time it was. A few moments later, his father, Lin, came over and asked about the noise. He told them everything was ready and called them to come eat. His mother turned to Lin, pointed out that this was a rare move from him, and urged him to go eat. And he replied with an okay. Lin Yuan remarked that one universal trait of humans was how they only realized the worth of something after losing it, trying afterward to make up for what had slipped away. In his last life, he drifted through days oblivious, looking down on normalcy, and Lin warned him that if he kept burying himself in games like that, he'd end up destroying himself completely. But his mother nudged Lin to stop because he'd start getting angry again soon. He recalled coming across the lifeless bodies of his parents sprawled across the shattered ruins of their home. He shared that once disaster had wiped everything out, he was crushed by the realization of how clueless he'd been before. Snapping back to the present, he mentioned that it was Sunday and wondered whether little Ton wasn't coming home to eat. His mother said little Ton had been gearing up for the mock exam lately and had taken her food to study at school, so when he had time later, he should bring some over, since what she packed didn't match up to freshly made food. She hadn't expected him to actually pick up cooking, and those chicken wings were good, telling Lin not to fight her for it, and he replied that it was all hers. But then Lin blinked when Lin Yuan dropped a chicken wing into his bowl. He declared that he'd be learning to cook more dishes in the future. His parents were taken aback, but they nodded and said yes. A bit later, Lin Yuan was sprinting up the stairs, tearing through them with jaw-dropping speed. He also hammered out sit-ups. He stated that if he wanted to keep up with the power the game brought into the real world down the line, he had to build a body tough enough to handle it. After some time, he wrapped up his run at the park. He noted 50 meters in 5.5 seconds wasn't bad, though there was still a lot of room to grow. Suddenly, his watch beeped. He acknowledged that it was time to head back. Lin Yuan went back into the game. The system notified him that he had entered the gravel desert. At that moment, giant birds drifted across the sky above the desert. Their shadows passed over Lin Yuan as they closed in fast. He caught sight of them. The birds were barreling toward him at ridiculous speed. They were level 2 whaling birds. The system notified Lin Yuan that he killed 3 whaling birds and earned 15 EXP. He muttered that it was only 15 experience points. He gave it a moment's consideration. A few moments later, undead whaling birds started gliding over the desert again. Wolves broke out from their hiding places. A massive pack started to form. Lin Yuan remarked that it immediately pulled in a massive pack of wolves, so no surprise it was one of the desert ghost wolves' favorite targets. He opened up a bottle. He downed the contents while facing the pack of wolves. The system notified him that he consumed the monster essence, increasing all his abilities by 10. He mentioned that it was a good moment to keep warming up. He quickly wiped out the wolves one after another. The system notified him that he had successfully killed 4 desert ghost wolves. More wolves lunged at him, and he flinched a little. But then the system notified him that he had successfully killed 10 desert ghost wolves. He adjusted his stance right as he hit the ground to steady himself. He got caught off guard when wolves charged in from multiple directions. They were surrounding him. He muttered that they had arrived, and the timing was perfect. He slashed through them and took them down one by cutting through their bodies. The system then notified him that he had successfully killed 30 desert ghost wolves. He swung his sword with full force. The system then notified him that he had successfully killed 40 desert ghost wolves and congratulated him on reaching level 5. He summoned the Netherworld Gate. He noted that after 2 battles, it was packed with undead monsters again. His Netherworld Gate capacity had hit 50 out of 50. He added that after boosting his 4 main attributes with the monster essence, his combat power should now be solid enough to take on elite monsters at his own level. He muttered that it was time to go find that person next. Lin Yuan headed over to Black Sand Town. He strolled down the street, weaving past the crowd. He made his way up to a building. He pushed open the door and walked in. Konsi, the local mage instructor, wanted to know who had stepped in. Lin Yuan greeted him as Instructor Konsi and explained that he came to learn skills. He remembered that in the game World of Immortality, skills normally came from monster drops or treasure chests in the form of skill books. He also recalled how each class had a beginner instructor in charge of teaching the basics, and Konsi happened to be the one who trained him when he was a rookie mage in his last life. Konsi figured that worked out well since tutoring Lin Yuan meant he'd have drink money for the next couple of weeks. Lin Yuan remembered he used to be a mage back then, so he barely had any intel on the Soul Reaper ability from that life. Still, its combat method leaned heavily on magic, so that helped. But first, he needed to pick up general mage skills that fit the Soul Reaper's playstyle before unlocking the unique ones. So he mentioned he wanted to learn Spirit Flame, Art of Healing, and the Art of Concealment. Konsi replied that with cash in hand, the rest would be smooth sailing. He caught sight of the coin-filled bag Lin Yuan was holding. Right away, he cheered him on, saying the brilliance of the mage's glory would shine on him. The system then popped up with a message congratulating Lin Yuan for unlocking 3 mage skills. He received Spirit Flame, Art of Healing, and Art of Concealment. He noted that Spirit Flame worked for ranged attacks, the Art of Healing helped recover himself and teammates, and the Art of Concealment could come in clutch when things got dicey, but they were all beginner tier, so anything higher would need more resources. That was fine for now, and his next move was to level up. A little while later, he traveled east of Black Sand Town to Black Sand Mountain. The system congratulated him again for finding the Cobalt Mine. He recalled kobolds being level 5 monsters living in burrows and caves nearby, with a strong nose that let them sniff out prey even in the dark. Plus, they were sneaky enough to ambush. They usually grouped in the hundreds, so both in terms of level and numbers, they were perfect targets to grind with his undead army. He drank the night vision potion he bought half an hour ago from an NPC, which would last him 30 minutes. He planned to use those kobolds to max out his concealment and spirit flame proficiency, and he figured he'd loot a few treasure chests while at it. He figured they'd push forward and clear the path using the ordinary torch. A few of the wolves rushed into the cave first. 15 minutes later, they were deep inside and it was pitch dark. Lin Yuan kept on high alert. He figured nothing was moving. He tossed his torch forward. It lit up the stairs below. The torchlight reflected off kobold eyes. Dozens of level 5 kobold miners had been hiding out of sight. Lin Yuan figured they had finally shown up. The torch hit the ground. The wolves charged forward. Lin Yuan told them to kill and not let a single one crawl away. The kobold miners threw themselves into the chaos. The system chimed in, letting Lin Yuan know that 2 kobold mine workers were down. One of the kobolds fired off its smash skill and swung at one of the wolves. The system popped up again, reporting 8 kobold mine workers dead, and Lin Yuan muttered that their combat stats were trash, but dodging their shovels was the real trick. More kobolds came flying at him, swinging pickaxes. He triggered his vanish skill. The kobolds blinked around, confused when he vanished. He scoffed at them, called them fools, and pointed out he was right there. The system updated again, announcing 20 kobold mine workers down. He climbed to higher ground after clearing them out. He acknowledged that his art of vanishing had leveled up. He glanced at the pile of kobolds he just took down. He muttered that the base stats on these standard kobolds were too low, so farming them for levels dragged out forever. They had now turned into level 5 undead kobold mine workers. He declared that from here on, they'd be replacing the undead ghost wolves and should push forward, though right now, the real priority was tracking down the local boss. A few moments later, Lin Yuan moved deeper into the cave with the undead kobolds in tow. Then he stopped in his tracks. He mentioned spotting a side path. Right then, he caught a glimpse of movement on the cave wall. Mud slimes clung there, melting into the shadows. Lin Yuan announced he had them in his sights. The system flagged that 2 mud slimes were eliminated, bumping his XP by 4. Suddenly, the kobold overseer's eyes gleamed in the dark behind him. It lunged fast, cutting through the air like a bullet. The undead kobolds froze for a beat when it struck. The kobold overseer was an elite monster at level 6. Since forever the weak had served as food for the strong, because that was how the world ran. No exceptions. But even the top predator ends up on someone's menu, because out there, at every turn, something deadlier waits. The kobold overseer slammed its weapon, and the cave filled with a deafening boom. The place sat thick with dust, making it hard to see anything clearly. Every so often, the hunter flipped the script and crept in, dressed as prey. This turned out to be one of those moments. Lin Yuan snatched the kobold overseer's weapon without any effort. He tossed out a casual remark about catching him. With one sharp yank, he launched the kobold overseer through the air. The creature slammed into the rocks ahead. It bounced back up fast and let out a furious roar. Before it could do anything else, Lin Yuan blitzed past at a speed it couldn't follow. The system pinged Lin Yuan, confirming that one kobold overseer had been taken out. The overseer dropped to its knees, blood bursting out before it could retaliate. It collapsed flat, and Lin Yuan caught the sound of growling. He threw a glance over his shoulder. More kobold mine workers had shown up and were closing in. The system fed him an update that the overseers had triggered Whip, putting the mine workers in a bloodthirsty state, which cranked their attack speed up by 40% and movement speed by 25% for 60 seconds. He guessed it was 40 of them, then changed it to 50, deciding it was a full-on horde, but figured his followers were almost even in numbers and power. He figured they might as well come out and stretch their legs. The desert ghost wolves marched out through the netherworld gate. Lin Yuan threw out a line marking the start of the hunt. He sent the wolves charging toward the kobolds. Both sides clashed without hesitation. The undead giant wolf joined the fray too. It triggered its skill, Demonic Wolf's Howl. The kobolds instantly froze, left stunned and bleeding badly. Lin Yuan didn't waste the opening and gave the order. They needed to wipe them out. The system poured in messages reporting that 40 kobold overseers had been defeated, followed by a notice that his level had jumped to 6. He cast Dark Summoning Art on the fallen kobolds. They got back up again, now level 6 elite undead kobold supervisors. Meanwhile, 2 kobold overseers tried sneaking away from the fight. Lin Yuan spotted them and tossed out a remark asking if they planned on fleeing. He figured they'd better check with his sword first. Then came a surprise. He spotted a pickaxe swinging right at his skull. The system flagged a boss using the skill Decisive Strike. Turned out to be the level 7 kobold boss. Lin Yuan threw out a line saying he'd been waiting for this one. The kobold boss swung its hammer and Lin Yuan ducked under it clean. The hammer slammed into the wall instead. The boss stiffened when its hammer jammed against the stone. Lin Yuan marked the moment. He slashed his sword at the boss, but the blade didn't even scratch it. He muttered that the boss's defenses were solid, not even cutting through the surface. The boss thrashed its hammer wildly at him. He jerked back, instincts flaring. The boss hoisted the hammer high, aiming to crush his head. He barely rolled away before it crashed down. He slid across the floor, scrambling to get his feet under him again. He muttered that the boss's rhythm was nasty, not even standard for elites, and by its raw strength, it had at least double or triple the punch. He figured it was better to pull some space between them while still chipping away at its health. He barked orders to his undead crew, and as the undead wolves and kobold fired off skin and stomp, the undead giant wolf unleashed demonic wolf's howl. The boss kicked off its own move, finishing blow, ramping up its damage. Lin Yuan gave the signal to strike. The wolves sprang and clamped their jaws wherever they could sink them in. The undead giant wolf followed, with Undead's wrath, giving the squad a 10% power bump and 20% critical edge. The boss let out a howl as the pack tore into it. Flesh started taking hits. From a safe spot, Lin Yuan kept his eyes locked on the scene. He powered up Spirit Flame magic. He hurled a volley of fire straight at the boss. He reminded himself that the kobold boss's magic resistance had always been trash. The boss lost it and let out a brutal roar. It bolted toward Lin Yuan fast, but he blinked out of sight with Vanish. He muttered that if it wanted to close the gap, then he wasn't holding back. He zeroed in on the weak spot, the exposed meat behind the neck. He rammed his sword into it, then drove it in deeper. The boss howled in agony. It flailed with the hammer again, but Lin Yuan veered clear. He gave a call to the undead giant wolf. The wolf launched forward in a single leap. Lin Yuan clutched its fur. He swung up onto its back. The wolf let out a bellow, and the rest of the pack charged again. Lin Yuan noted the armor had cracked open. He muttered that this strike was it, and it would end the fight. The boss screamed again. The kobold miners charged straight at Lin Yuan. He brushed it off as nothing more than a last-ditch effort. The system chimed in right after, letting him know he'd just wiped out 75 kobold miners. One kobold managed to slip through the frenzy. It froze when Lin Yuan blocked its path. He threw out a jab about whether it planned to run. He followed that with a reminder that it should drop its life before it tried. He lunged forward and ended it in one swift strike. The kobold's head hit the ground. The system notified Lin Yuan that the kobold chieftain had been taken out, and his experience points went up by 50. He gave a small nod at the notification. The system congratulated him on hitting level 7. He muttered that level 7 felt pretty nice. It pushed him that much closer to level 10, which meant he could finally head to the main city out in the western desert. As for the stealth technique and Spirit Flame, both had reached mastery, leveled up to 2, and doubled in effectiveness. Then he caught sight of a glow coming off the kobold boss. He guessed it had to be a bronze treasure chest. He opened it without hesitation. Golden light burst out as the chest unlocked. The system listed off his haul: kobold leather pouch, unquenchable torch, skull mask, and shadow gloves. He checked the kobold leather pouch and found 20 gold coins tucked inside. He remembered hearing that soon global banks would open exchange lines between real money and in-game currency. So with 20 coins being worth 200,000 yuan, that wasn't a bad pull. The unquenchable torch gave him night vision within a 3-meter radius in complete darkness and had no duration limit. The skull mask functioned as a weapon that cut physical damage by 5% and boosted both stamina and strength by 10. Lin Yuan's attention then landed on the shadow gloves, and something about them hooked his interest. The gloves matched the kobold chieftain's body strength and bumped up both defense and attack by 30. He figured his luck was solid, since scoring a silver-grade weapon from a bronze chest wasn't something that happened every day, and getting gloves modeled after the kobold chieftain's strength had him eager to test them out. Not far from the kobold cave, Huang Feilong, the Bloodscar guild leader and a level 8 warrior, was cutting down packs of wolves. He commented that their latest training must have paid off, seeing as they shredded 30 phantom desert wolves in under a minute. Huang Feihu, the level 5 thief and vice leader, followed up with a note that as long as the two brothers stayed united, nothing could stop them. A guild member added that they were every bit the force they expected from a guild's head and second in command, with another chiming in that if they ran into anyone from the Thunder Guild again, they'd wipe the floor with them. Huang Feihu let out a scoff, then circled back to how Lin Yuan had suddenly popped up out of nowhere and robbed them of the world boss kill they almost had, which would have shut down any competition. Their minds went to that system announcement, the one where it flashed across the screen that Lin Yuan had taken down the world boss giant wolf. Lin Yuan had stood over the fallen beast in triumph. Huang Feihu grumbled about not knowing what kind of ridiculous luck that punk had, but promised that if they crossed paths, he'd let his rage loose, though Huang Feilong cut in and reminded him yet again to stop making rash moves. He warned that Lin Yuan wasn't someone to provoke lightly and had enough power to back it up, so instead of stirring trouble, they should focus on pulling him to their side. He brought up the nearby kobold dungeon and decided to check the location while the others rested and got their strength back. Huang Feihu mumbled that he'd already been scolded 3 times by his brother over that mutt, and it grated on him. He swore Lin Yuan would one day kneel before his brother with his fangs ripped out and his head rolling just to prove who the real powerhouse was. One of the members told him not to waste energy on that trash and nudged him to check something out. Huang Feihu turned with a frown. They spotted a mage's silhouette in the distance. She was a young woman, and her appearance was striking. Huang Feihu and the other guild members didn't bother hiding the twisted grins that immediately formed on their faces. Lin Yuan stepped out of the kobold mine, brushing off dust like it was just another Tuesday. He mentioned adding an undead of chief rank with solid combat stats to his crew, and with 70 undead monsters already stacked in the gate of the underworld, he figured he might as well keep cruising forward. Then came the interruption. He caught the mage's warning as she told everyone to back off. She didn't want them getting closer because once they did, she wouldn't bother holding back. One of the guild members cracked a grin, calling it good luck, since bumping into someone this gorgeous wasn't part of the day's plan. Huang Feihu chimed in with a sleazy grin, saying she had no reason to panic because she was just going to entertain the brothers for a bit, and it'd be easier for her to enjoy it instead of resisting, which the other guy backed up by saying all she had to do was keep their vice captain happy, and she'd be showered with rewards. But she wasn't having it, firing back that the second they moved in, she'd strike without hesitation. Huang Feihu chuckled, tossing out a challenge to see if she'd really follow through. She was just some mage, and he scoffed at the idea that she could do any damage. He called it delusion, and told her if she hadn't quit yet, she might as well keep flailing because the more she kicked back, the more it fired him up. She let out a scream when he yanked her skirt, fury and fear cracking through. That's when Lin Yuan's fist came out of nowhere and slammed straight into Huang Feihu's face, knocking his teeth out clean. He had the shadow gloves equipped. The impact packed so much heat, it launched Huang Feihu through the air. His guild crew panicked hard and called out for him. He finally crashed into a rocky cliff ahead. His face got wrecked and he blacked out on the spot. Lin Yuan commented on the punch, saying the result wasn't bad at all and way smoother than expected. One of the guild members freaked out, muttering about how they had to alert their captain somehow. Another blurted out a question at Lin Yuan, while a third warned him that crossing the Bloodscar Guild meant his end was pretty much sealed. Lin Yuan didn't even blink as he stared them down. He explained that the Bloodscar Guild had topped the ranks in the early phase of the game Eternity, specifically in the newbie village of Black Sandtown. Most of them were red-named players, the kind flagged by the system for racking up sin points past 10 through killing, stealing, or looting like it was a lifestyle. Even if the evil ruler hadn't rolled into the world yet and players didn't die for real, dropping loot and levels still hit like a truck. He threw out a question, checking if they were all Bloodscar Guild. Then he mentioned that in its past life, that bunch gave him nothing but grief. They blinked in confusion, unsure what he was getting at. One finally confirmed it, bragging again about their top-tier status in Black Sandtown and asking if Lin Yuan was finally shaking from crossing their vice captain. He said it was already too late, but in a show of fake mercy, he offered an out, cut off both arms, kneel like a mutt, and beg by calling him grandpa over and over. Lin Yuan didn't waste a breath and sliced off their arms in one swift move. The limbs spun through the air before hitting the ground. Lin Yuan thanked them sarcastically, said he'd handle the arm-chopping part himself, and told them to save the dog routine for the road to hell. The mage took it all in and remarked that he was strong. Meanwhile, Huang Feihu finally stirred. A system ping told him he'd used a health potion and got 20% of his health points and magic back. He spat out that Lin Yuan was a bastard. His fate, as far as he was concerned, was already sealed. Huang Feilong muttered that he needed to see for himself who had the guts of a bear and a leopard, someone clearly tired of living. And the guild member pointed him out without hesitation. Lin Yuan and the mage already caught on to their arrival. The guild member grumbled that it was the kid who nearly took out their vice master, prompting Huang Feilong to press for a name. But then it clicked. He mentioned the eyes, cold and indifferent by rumor, yet radiating a crushing pressure. They carried the glint of moonlight forged into blades, sharp enough to slice through anything in their path. That aura rolling off him felt like standing under a collapsing sky. The guild member urged him to quit standing around and show the brat what real power looked like, spitting out a curse at Lin Yuan and calling him a blind mutt who clearly didn't care whether he lived or died, then declared that the kid might as well start digging his own grave. Meanwhile, Huang Feilong cursed internally, piecing it together that between that oppressive presence and that sword, clearly a drop from a boss-tier monster, the guy was almost certainly the same one who'd crossed Lin Yuan before. Those idiots couldn't have picked a worse target if they tried, and all they'd done was screw everything up again. The guild member kept ranting that Lin Yuan was already marked for death, and there was no going back. Lin Yuan looked over and asked if Huang Feilong was the Bloodscar Guild's leader. Huang Feilong responded that dignity wasn't something you threw away. That fight wasn't going to be avoided. Suddenly, Huang Feihu burst from the trees behind Lin Yuan. The mage called out for him to look behind. Huang Feihu barked that he was scum and deserved death. He lunged without hesitation. Meanwhile, Huang Feilong noted that challenging the Bloodscar Guild was the dumbest move the kid had ever made, but he admitted it was also a perfect opening. He and Huang Feihu came at Lin Yuan from opposite sides at once. Then the surprise hit. Lin Yuan summoned the Kobold Chieftain. The thing wore a twisted grin. It brought its hammer around in a brutal arc. The blow landed hard on Huang Feihu, making blood spray as he got knocked through the air again. Huang Feilong froze when Lin Yuan charged straight at him. Lin Yuan muttered that it was his turn now. Huang Feilong flinched. Lin Yuan slashed his sword and carved a gash clean across him. A huge wound opened on his torso and he crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Lin Yuan scoffed that the guild wasn't even worth taking seriously. Out of nowhere, the system flagged him, logging a kill on a human player and raising his sin value by 2 points. He muttered that as long as he didn't rack up more, it would vanish on its own in a week. Then the mage noted that the guild had scattered and asked if they should give chase. He replied that they were just pests, not worth the effort. Huang Feihu's body vanished. A battle axe with explosive traits dropped. Lin Yuan also picked up the cross dragon fang blade and the thorn dagger. He noted that their stats were solid and even if unused, they'd fetch a decent price. The mage walked up to him. She addressed him respectfully and thanked him for saving her life that day. She admitted she still didn't know his name. He turned away. He said that one day she'd see his name sitting at the top of the world's top 10 list. She froze when she heard that, but then she waved it off, called the list meaningless, and asked him to take her with him. Lin Yuan was in the Wailing Desert. Suddenly, a scorpion buried in the sand crept up behind him. They were level 6 Wailing Thunder Scorpions. Lin Yuan instantly shifted into battle mode. He slashed through the scorpions one after another. He whipped his sword upward and carved through several of them in one clean arc. He didn't flinch while dealing with the swarm. He followed up by sweeping his sword around himself and stirred up a swirling aura. The system chimed in, reporting that 60 Wailing Thunder Scorpions had been eliminated in the area and his level had risen to level 8. He muttered that hitting level 8 in one go made the grind for paralysis herbs less of a pain, even if it was a hassle. 2 days earlier, he ran into the alchemist Emor. Emor hailed him as a hero and remarked that their meeting had finally come. The system flagged a new quest from alchemist Emor and prompted him to accept or decline. The quest, titled Emor's Will, tasked him with venturing into the Wailing Desert to collect 100 paralysis herbs and bring them back to Emor within 1 day, ranked Black Iron. Lin Yuan recalled that in due time, a special dungeon would unlock in the main city. That dungeon overflowed with thunder-type monsters, and surviving it demanded absurd thunder resistance. Because of that, thunder resistance potions would skyrocket in demand and fetch thousands of gold coins, and someone in his past life struck gold because of it. Finishing the paralysis herb quest would hand over the recipe for that highly effective potion. That day marked Imor's arrival in Black Sand Town, and once the quest was submitted, the man would retire for good, locking the recipe out forever. He picked yes without hesitation. Back in the present, he commented that the Wailing Thunder Scorpion, a level 6 thunder monster guarding the herbs, didn't really worry him anymore. Since the quest was his now, he planned to use the chance to max out his gathering skill proficiency. His gathering skill had reached level 2, which sped up collection and gave him a 5% shot at pulling rare herbs. He mentioned needing to head a bit deeper into the desert. Out of nowhere, he triggered a thunder scorpion trap hidden under the sand. He clocked the threat right away when the sand shifted under his feet. The scorpion's stinger burst from beneath the surface. It lunged at Lin Yuan, but he slipped past it with his silver-cutting strike skill. He skidded through the sand to stabilize himself. His face went pale. The system flashed a warning that a mutated monster, the Crystal Demon Thunder Scorpion, had emerged and that he was in serious danger. He guessed it had to be a demon-type mutant showing up out of nowhere. He muttered that the situation had taken a nasty turn, but he figured today would be the day to sharpen the edge of his silver-cutting strike for real. He launched a full-force blow at the scorpion. His sword only scraped the surface of its armor. He grimaced that its armor didn't leave a single opening. The system popped up again, announcing the boss's activation of the paralyzing Thunder Strike skill. He groaned that it really was a Thunder Strike. The system then confirmed the boss was also activating Poisonous Needle Stab. He sprang off the scorpion's head just in time, making its tail jab itself. It bounced back fast, so he darted away immediately. He muttered that its raw power was more than expected and figured he had to redirect its focus. The scorpion barreled straight for him. He called out to the kobold. He summoned the Netherworld Gate. The kobold chieftain chipped off a bit of the scorpion's health. Lin Yuan figured the double damage effect must have missed its cue. The system flagged a boss move, flashing the name Earth-Shattering Pincers. He answered with Spirit Flame Magic, letting it rip. Flames cracked through the air, pounding into the scorpion with a deep rolling boom. He threw out a line about how it should savor the upgraded burn. Time to go in. The kobolds rushed to trap the scorpion's pincers, using their robes like restraints. The scorpion let out a furious roar while thrashing to break free, but the kobolds held on with everything they had. The kobold chieftain launched skyward and brought its hammer crashing down. Double damage landed, and the system pinged Lin Yuan about the critical hit landing clean. The scorpion flew into a frenzy, ripping out of the restraints. Lin Yuan vaulted off the ground without hesitation. The scorpion hesitated, unable to track where he went. He muttered something about how there wasn't a crack in the shell to slip through. The system flashed a notice that his Slayer Hunter title had been detected, boosting his attack power, double damage chance, and magical damage by 10% each. He promised he'd crack every inch of its body and leave nothing but brittle scraps. It was time for the thing to embrace its end. He landed a crushing punch straight into the scorpion. Dust and sand exploded as the scorpion got slammed into the dirt. The system chimed again, logging the kill on the transformed demonic beast, slaying Crystal Thunder Scorpion, and awarding 560 experience points. He tapped into his dark summoning art and brought the scorpion back from the dead. A moment later, wailing thunder scorpions surged into motion. Lin Yuan caught the movement right away. A swarm of them came barreling toward him. The sheer number caught him off guard, but then he welcomed it, saying they arrived just in time. They could come at him because he had a brand new pet ready to mess around with the whole bunch. The system then flashed again, logging the activation of Crystal Thunderstorm. The lightning ripped straight into the wailing scorpions. Lin Yuan shifted behind them in an instant. He tore through them one by one, the system spamming notifications that he kept hitting weak points. His sword swung once, dropping a scorpion with a clean finish. He followed through, driving the blade deep into another and splitting it apart. The system pinged twice, marking back-to-back level-ups and congratulating him on reaching level 10. He made a note about the back-to-back level spike, feeling pretty solid. The system followed up with new gear drops. Silver-grade weapons, including the Lightning Spear, Guardian's Greaves, Ring of Paralysis, and Phantom's Arm Guard. He pointed out that the chest was loaded with silver-grade gear, and figured selling some of it would give his parents a serious boost. The system reported the area had been fully cleared of demonic beasts. Then it rolled out one more reward, a gold-grade skill book, tied to his specific ability. The skill book materialized in his hand. The system flagged the title as Curse of Darkness. He considered that a lucky pull. The system confirmed the skill book had been auto-registered into his memory. It dropped one final message, congratulating him for unlocking an exclusive Soul Reaper skill. The Curse of Darkness hit for 20% of the target's health points, or healed undead for 20% instead. Lin Yuan mentioned being able to recover 20% of the undead's life points. He glanced back at the undead scorpion nearby. It was still hanging on with 60% of its life points left. He figured it was worth a shot. He cast the Curse of Darkness on the undead scorpion. A system alert popped up saying its life points had jumped to 80%. He decided warm-up time was done and started heading for the main city to hunt down his first subordinate. Then, a light tap landed on his shoulder. A realization hit him right away. Back in the real world, his mother mentioned that his father had pulled something in his back and needed help. Not long after, Lin Yuan told his dad not to push himself. His mother started scolding his father for being reckless at his age, fussing about how he was messing with the air conditioner again without calling a technician, and pointed at his injury like it was the obvious result. He explained that they had to save where they could, and reminded her that he fixed the washing machine last week with just a few easy moves. Besides, he brushed it off as barely anything, and said he just needed a nap to recover since he had to pick up Lin Tan from school the next day. Lin Yuan just kept listening without interrupting as he closed the door behind him. The following morning, the noise of workers stirred Lin Yuan's mother from sleep. She called out asking if it was Lin Yuan and why he was being so noisy that early. Instead, she came face to face with workers bringing in furniture and a new TV. One of them politely stepped forward and checked if they were Mr. and Mrs. Lin, letting them know these were the items Lin Yuan had bought and delivered, and asked for confirmation. His mother asked them to hold on and started wondering aloud if this was even real, or if she was still dreaming. Meanwhile, Lin Yuan was at the gym going through his workout routine, while a few nearby girls kept stealing glances. Out of nowhere, a staff member approached and apologized for bothering him. She offered him the VIP package, mentioning the full year's fee would be deducted up front. He handed over his card and said it was fine. He figured that after selling off some old gear, he had enough to redo the house and throw in a family gym membership too, since his parents and Lin Tan needed to start building habits early if they wanted to ease into the immortality stage later. The staff member, on the other hand, was staring because despite the effort, he showed zero fatigue. So clearly his physical ability was off the charts. Then she spotted his card and froze. She asked if that was the premium VIP card, the one reserved for those with over 5 million sitting in their account. At the same time, Lin Yuan was on a call confirming it was just prize money from a past gaming tournament and told the other person to relax at home for the day while he handled Lin Tan. The employee stared at him, still wrapping her head around the fact that someone his age could be that impressive. A little later, over at Shushui First High School, students were pouring out after class, and one called out that it was time to hit the internet cafe and squat up, while another told them to wait because they were in two. Lin Tan stepped out as well, moving down the stairs with effortless poise. Out of the blue, one of her classmates reminded her it was her birthday and said she should come over because her brother had brought her favorite strawberry cake, and her friend immediately chimed in saying she was lucky to have a brother and wished she had one too. Lin Tan quietly wondered what was so great about that. She thought back to Lin Yuan constantly glued to his games, ignoring everything else around him, including her. To her, having a brother wasn't something worth wanting. Then a voice called out and addressed her as School Beauty Lin, accusing her of being too full of herself. He pointed out that they had already tried inviting her through others multiple times and got nothing. And another guy added that now they'd come personally. So at the very least, she should give them some basic respect. Lin Tan tossed the question over to the guys, trying to figure out what they wanted. One of her classmates called out to her, calling her class president, and wanting to know who those people were. One of the guys made a gross comment about her skin and tossed out a demand to touch it. Lin Tan shut that down, told him to back off, and warned him not to get near her. If he tried anything again, she'd call the cops without a second thought. He spat out a curse and threw out some nonsense about her not being worthy of respect. Her classmates started getting nervous, glancing her way with concern. He kept going, tossing out something about her acting all innocent while freaking out over a few crude words. She closed her eyes, steeling herself for the hit she knew was coming. Before anything could land, Lin Yuan clamped his hand around the guy's wrist. She snapped her eyes open, startled by what just happened. Lin Yuan glared at the guy and dropped a cold question about who told him it was okay to mess with his sister. She froze, staring at him, completely thrown off by his sudden appearance. He looked ready to annihilate someone, every bit of him radiating danger as his glare locked in. The guy swore again and tossed out a snide comment about some stray dog showing up out of nowhere. Another guy puffed up and said if he didn't knock all the guy's teeth out that day, he wasn't himself, while another jumped in with a death wish line. And a third growled that they should quit talking and just snap Lin Yuan's arm first, deal with the rest later. Lin Yuan sidestepped the first one without effort and landed a clean punch on the second. He followed up with another hit, sharp and fast. Then he spun and kicked the third one square in the chest. He drove his foot into one guy's face without pausing. Then he kept stomping on the guy's face over and over while he stayed down. The students circled around, watching in wide-eyed silence while the men broke down in tears and shame. Lin Yuan tossed out a short comment that they were done here, while Lin Tan stood frozen, stunned stiff. A little while later, she turned to him, asking why he even came that day, since he usually did nothing but game all day, and she couldn't figure out how he ended up at school to pick her up. He told her their dad messed up his back and their mom was home helping him out. She checked if it was anything serious, and he gave a low-key reply that it wasn't a huge deal. The air between them turned quiet after that. In her memory, it felt like forever since she'd had this kind of conversation with him, and the whole moment came off weirdly uncomfortable. She took a slow, long look at him. Out of nowhere, one of her classmates called out to her again. Someone pointed at him and asked if that really was her brother, throwing in that he didn't look anything like the lazy version she always described. And another jumped in to agree, throwing compliments about Lin Yuan being cool and good-looking, wondering why she'd never mentioned him before. She hesitated, unsure if she actually found him handsome. One of the students piped up again, curious about who he even was, and pointing out how ridiculously handsome he looked, and someone else nodded along and said he was one of the senior grads and way better looking than the boys still in school. Lin Tan caught on to the fact that his popularity was shooting through the roof way faster than expected. One of the students threw a casual greeting at him, and when he greeted her back, Lin Tan started wondering when he got so tall and how she missed it until now. She noticed his muscles too, and while she questioned when he even started working out, she figured that explained the way he handled that earlier fight so easily. He hadn't changed names or anything. She suddenly remembered the old version of him, glued to his games and too lazy to clean his room or himself. Now, she couldn't shake the feeling that something huge and sudden had shifted in him. One of Lin Tan's classmates mentioned they'd see her the next day, and she returned the same words to the group without hesitation. She blinked in confusion when he suddenly dropped into a crouch on the ground. He motioned for her to get on, which left the other students frozen mid-step. She waved it off, said she'd walk on her own, and tried to puzzle out what he was doing while quietly wishing nobody would carry her like that in front of everyone. Then he tugged her, which threw her off balance. She started to object, but he pointed out that everyone else was already gone, and if she couldn't walk, there was no need to tough it out. He brought up the moment earlier when she got pushed and twisted her ankle, asking if that's what happened. She stared, trying to figure out when he even picked up on that. A short while later, Lin Yuan returned and casually announced their arrival, and Lin Tan greeted their dad and mom without missing a beat. Their parents traded quiet glances. Their father eventually responded, saying the important part was that both kids had made it home. After dinner, Lin Yuan was at the sink doing the dishes. Their mother nudged Lin Tan to pay attention and asked if he didn't seem like a whole new person now. Their father chimed in and mentioned he cooked sometimes, and other times he brought home new appliances, which left Lin Tan blank. Their mother smiled and said the sibling bond looked just like it used to in their childhood, way better than before, and she wanted to know if that was true. Lin Tan figured he was definitely a strange one, and maybe he really had changed. Lin Yuan announced he had everything wrapped up. He'd already disappeared back to his room. She kept her eyes on the door as it clicked shut behind him. She tried to guess what she was even expecting from him, and figured, yeah, he was still just a shut-in, jobless gamer. Then he caught her off guard by handing her a small bottle of medicine. He told her to use it after showering because it worked wonders. He was already heading off to play, so unless it was something urgent, she shouldn't bother entering his room. She cradled the bottle in both hands. She muttered that it was fine, since no one had any intention of going in there anyway. A faint smile tugged at her lips. He'd clearly heard their mom earlier when she told her to take a look, and her voice drifted back again, saying their bond really had gotten better. But she shifted gears and asked what exactly happened at school earlier, and Lin Tan brushed it off and said she was going to take a shower. He declared that now, all recent household duties were done. He cast a glance toward the VR headset. He announced it was time to get back into the game. His vision shifted as he dropped into the central zones of Winsands. He muttered that they had to track down and drag that rat in. The system pinged him, confirming his entry into Winsands. Moments later, a man cried out to the honored officer, swearing on everything it was all just a misunderstanding. But the officer barked for silence and told him to take those filthy lies and do some soul-searching behind bars. That's when he suddenly froze, the moment Lin Yuan's presence hit him. Then the feeling wavered, and she figured it was probably just her imagination. Lin Yuan was wedged behind a tall pillar out of sight. He figured that patrol units in the street had a sixth sense for sniffing out troublemakers, and judging by his current sin value, he still needed to stay buried for at least 3 more days. That worked out anyway, since now was a good chance to finally go retrieve something he hadn't touched in forever, his old friend. Lin Yuan stepped into the church. Inside, Father Lawrence declared that in the name of the Lord, the darkness rooted in the man's past had been swept clean, and from this moment on, his soul would shine as pure as untouched snow. The holy light guiding his steps as baptism marked the start of a new path. Out of nowhere, Lin Yuan brought up that he came from the charity house for the poor. Father Lawrence froze mid-motion. Lin Yuan explained that he'd heard about a patient in critical condition and had shown up to treat him. Father Lawrence admitted they'd then be counting on him for Night Doug's illness, and Lin Yuan gave a simple nod. Lin Yuan remembered Doug Wayne as a former knight of the legendary Scorpion Lions, an elite order from the ancient Western Desert Kingdom. Back in his previous life, he'd barely scraped a gold-grade weapon off the man when he was only level 15. He turned to Doug and mentioned he was here to purge the poisons in his body. Doug stared straight at him. He noticed he was only level 10. He scoffed at the idea that someone barely ranked higher than a street patrol mage was going to treat him. His breath hitched, and he coughed up a piece of his insides. Lin Yuan pointed out that the poisons had already begun breaking down his organs from the inside, and if he didn't accept treatment, he wouldn't last past the month. Doug replied that detoxifying his body required a full 1,000 grams of rotted gill fish fat, and if Lin Yuan wasn't afraid of dying, he could take his chances in the muddy clay desert. A system message popped up for Lin Yuan, confirming that he'd triggered Doug's request quest and asking if he wanted to accept. It was a gold-level quest to gather 1,000 grams of rotted gill fish fat and cure Doug's poison. Lin Yuan accepted without hesitation. Meanwhile, in the muddy clay desert, human skulls bobbed across the muddy surface. A pack of rotted gill fish swam through the sludge. They were level 15, and the players trying to take them down weren't ready for what hit them. The party leaders shouted for everyone to brace themselves, warning that the monsters had razor-sharp teeth and couldn't be allowed to land a hit, and told them to strike. One party member groaned about a sore back. A fish whipped its tail to launch an attack. The leader ducked just in time, but the rest of the team weren't so lucky and got tossed into the swamp. The moment they hit the water, the fish closed in fast, and their cries for help shot up. The fish triggered its tailweave leap skill. Another let out a booming roar and shoved the leader backward. The leader stumbled, thrown off balance. The fish surged forward and opened its jaws wide to devour him. In that instant, he figured this was the end. He shut his eyes and braced himself, ready to die, but Lin Yuan showed up. Lin Yuan caught him by the collar mid-fall. He told him not to get in his way. Then he launched himself forward, still gripping the guy's collar tight. The fish flinched under the crushing force of his aura. Its head burst into pieces. Lin Yuan scoffed as he hit the ground clean. The leader stared at him, completely lost. The leader checked if he even made it out alive. He waved Lin Yuan off, told him to wait up. Lin Yuan blew right past him without a glance. The leader pointed out that he was the same so-called great hero from earlier. Meanwhile, Lin Yuan pulled together Spirit Flame Magic mid-leap. He hurled them down at the fishes swimming below. The Spirit Flame Magic lit them up as it poured onto them, and they started taking hits. One of the fish burst up from the muck. The rest piled out after it, all launching themselves at Lin Yuan. The leader yelled something about the great hero needing to watch his back. The fishes snapped at air, while Lin Yuan dodged around them with ease. He threw back a jab at them, mocking the weak effort. He slid across the ground and locked up his stance, one fist tight and ready. He braced his feet, digging in hard for the burst. Right after, he called in his sword. He threw out a line about trash staying trash, even in groups. He blurred between fish, slicing across them one after the other. The leader lost it, barking out how that wasn't what great heroes were supposed to look like when the 8 of them nearly got flattened, and Lin Yuan was casually cutting 5 down by himself. Then griped that even with all that power, he couldn't solo those things. The worst part about those monsters wasn't even the numbers, it was their freaky group attack. Back in the thick of it, the fishes had already clustered up and were readying the combo move. A green fog poured over the battlefield, clouding Lin Yuan's view completely. He didn't even flinch, more curious than cautious. The system dropped a heads up about the rotted gill fishes casting Cursed Fang Echo, a group ability that released a toxic fog that could trigger status effects like confusion and hearing illusions on everything nearby. Lin Yuan brushed it off, unimpressed, already decided he wouldn't fall for it in this life. He called out for the giant wolf and told it to rise. The order was to use Howl of the Hungry Wolf. The giant wolf let out a thunderous cry and the system flashed that the attack landed and the rotted gill fish got slammed with dizziness. Lin Yuan activated the Awakening Mask, a one-shot shield against the fog's poison. He shifted into a low stance, ready to burst forward. Then he bolted in. He threw down a call for their deaths, no holding back. The system rang again, confirming a hit to a weak spot. He slashed through once more, and the system popped up with the same critical strike notice. He snapped out another cold verdict and pressed in. The fishes screamed through the pain as another alert from the system signaled another direct hit. One of them tried to crawl away from behind while Lin Yuan stood tall over the remains. Lin Yuan tossed a final taunt about it being way too slow. Since they loved wallowing around like filth, then they could rot in that filth for good, where scum belonged. He flung his sword at it, and it went off in a massive blast. The leader called it amazing, though the mage beside him muttered that dropping their guard now would be stupid. They turned to watch, since the enemy was already moving in. Lin Yuan gave the order for the Thunder Scorpion to launch an attack. The creature responded by unleashing its Crystal Thunderstorm skill. Those thunder bullets slammed into the mud with sharp crackling force. Buried fish took the hit full on in a messy targeted bombardment. Some shots only skimmed across their skin with shallow sparks. A few struck mouths dead on, though none punched deep enough to finish the job. One of the players grumbled that it was useless, that the gap in level and numbers made a clean sweep impossible. Lin Yuan suddenly vaulted off the corpses and strode straight toward them. He demanded to know who claimed he planned on killing them all. He yanked his hood over his head with zero hesitation. At the same moment, the leader frowned and questioned what exactly was going on, while another player pointed out that based on how the scorpion aimed, it only targeted the female fishes' bellies. They all turned again because now the male fishes had started going at each other. The player just blinked, lost for a second. In the muck, chaos broke loose as the fish turned violent on their own. Lin Yuan understood that when female rotted gill fish died or laid eggs, they released a thick, sticky fluid. That stuff drove the males into a frenzy to defend the eggs, so they'd just start tearing each other apart. He made it clear that this was exactly the instinct he'd chosen to exploit. Suddenly, a massive rotted gill fish burst out of the sludge. A player shouted out a warning to their great lord. Lin Yuan didn't even flinch, even as the creature rushed him open-jawed. One of the players wondered aloud if this one was female too, and how it got that massive if so. Lin Yuan responded flatly that its timing worked out perfectly. He gave a quick command to his ghostly wolves. They lunged in together and sank their teeth in wherever they found soft flesh. Lin Yuan acknowledged that it lived up to its level 15 elite status. Even 6 undead wolves couldn't land a fatal strike, though pinning it down would do the trick just fine. He He sliced through with his sword, and the system pinged with confirmation that one elite rotted gill fish had been slain. He noted that it went down just like that. He scooped the eggs from its belly, then shoved them up into its head. The leader, confused, asked the others what exactly he was trying to pull. Lin Yuan turned and gave instructions for the giant wolf to move to the rock at the center. The giant wolf obeyed instantly and bounded for the spot he'd pointed out. Lin Yuan confirmed it was the right place. The giant wolf dropped the egg-stuffed head on the rock and let out a guttural roar. Lin Yuan instructed it to gather them in. The fish swam in fast toward the rock where the giant wolf stood. Lin Yuan stated that he would be drawing them all in. The fish slammed into the rock with frantic momentum. A player noticed the whole school getting stunned from the impact. He remembered that fish eggs emitted pheromones and figured out that Lin Yuan was using that to whip the school into a hormone-fueled mess. Meanwhile, Lin Yuan muttered that it still wasn't enough, so he would keep going. It was about time they got their favorite drink. Lin Yuan told them to keep going, and the kobolds didn't hesitate. They swung their pickaxe and slammed it straight into the fish. One of the players guessed whether it was the blue poison sac found inside the males. Lin Yuan confirmed it, explaining the blue poison sac inside the males acts a lot like capsaicin, and the poisonous gas and rank odor it released would instantly trigger danger signals in nearby fish. The rest of the rotted gillfish darted away from the blue liquid dripping out of the sac. Lin Yuan noted how they were putting at least 5 meters between themselves and the source, unwilling to linger, and added that even they weren't totally immune to their own poison, so getting exposed meant they'd end up helpless. The leader pointed out the obvious, saying they were gone. Every last school of them cleared out. Lin Yuan reminded them that now only the subquest and the loot remained. He walked over to the pile of dead fish. He figured the mask had pulled some serious weight in the fight too. Too bad that after dropping 5 gold coins on it, he only got 1 use out of it, so yeah, it stung, but not a total waste. The system let him know he'd received 1,000 grams of rotted gill fish oil. Lin Yuan almost forgot about the other item. It was the Wave Tickler's nose, categorized as an armor-type item. He stared at it, unimpressed. He felt the quest reward stats were decent, but the design looked like something the devs whipped up as a prank, and he couldn't wrap his head around why this clown-grade monstrosity even existed as a drop. Out of nowhere, the leader got hyped, calling it amazing and reacting to the way it lit up. It even moved. Lin Yuan tossed out a dry comment, asking if he seriously liked that ridiculous nose cover. The leader thought it looked one of a kind, and before he even finished asking if it was for sale, he already declared he'd buy it no matter what. One of the other party members gave a quick apology, mentioning this kind of reaction was pretty normal for him. Lin Yuan shrugged and told him to just take it. The leader tried to protest, saying he should at least pay something, but Lin Yuan brushed that off too. Right after that, wings burst from Lin Yuan's back. The leader claimed he was a real angel, while the rest of the party grumbled about how absurd it was that someone would genuinely offer money for that thing. Moments later, Lin Yuan stood inside the church. He poured the rotted gill fish oil into Doug's chest. Doug looked stunned. He hadn't expected Lin Yuan to actually gather the stuff. The system then notified Lin Yuan that he had successfully completed the gold quest, Doug's request, and earned the gold grade reward, the green spirit blade. Lin Yuan reflected that he finally got his hands on the green spirit blade, the first gold weapon he ever secured back in his last life. Its base effects didn't break any records, but the built-in skill, Green Spirit Curse Seal, packed solid combat utility, mostly thanks to its hidden trait. Every strike pumped green spirit energy into the enemy, and after 3 consecutive hits, it would unload bonus damage worth 250% of the spirit stat. Back then, the green spirit blade was his main weapon for carving a path through the West Desert until he climbed to the top and claimed the #1 mage title in that region. He ran a thorough check on the blade. The system followed up with more rewards, this time delivering 1,000 main city reputation and 500 Scorpion Tail Knights reputation. He figured the points only pushed him up to neutral standing, but just like before, that was enough to let him roam freely through the city zones. Then something unexpected hit. The system added 1 more bonus, stating that due to the high-quality quest completion, he gained an extra NPC affinity boost. Doug's favor climbed by 10 points. He felt that maybe things were diverging a bit this time around. Doug thanked him sincerely, admitting that without his help, he might have ended up buried before the next month even arrived, and Lin Yuan brushed it off as something anyone would have done. Doug said he owed him something in return and wanted to offer a warning. Lin Yuan guessed that those 10 extra affection points had triggered a hidden storyline for him. Doug warned that if he ever ran into someone named Quincy, he needed to stay far away. Lin Yuan mentioned Quincy was his teacher and turned to Doug, wondering what made him say something like that. Doug countered with a sharp look, unsure whether the teacher claim was even true. He pointed out that even though the guy masked his power, he was clearly a Soul Reaper in disguise. He tossed the question back to confirm it. Lin Yuan pressed him on how he found out, figuring he had kept his identity under wraps so well that not even Quincy should have been able to detect it. Doug laid it out clean, saying he used to serve under the Knights of the Black Scorpions, a royal outfit tasked with secret missions, one of which involved hunting Soul Reapers. And to do that, he learned something called Darkness Perception. That ability was exclusive to the Knights of the Black Scorpions. Anytime a Soul Reaper showed up, they would automatically ping on his radar, with clarity getting sharper the closer they got. Lin Yuan asked if he'd been marked since the start, and found himself uneasy at the idea of a skill that directly hunted Soul Reapers. Doug denied it, explaining that at first he was dying from poison and too weak to pick up on anything. But now that it was cleared out, the aura tied to the Lord of Darkness radiating off Lin Yuan couldn't be ignored anymore. Lin Yuan asked what the Lord of Darkness was. Doug went into story mode, calling it one of the oldest legends in the world of immortality. In that realm, there were 5 gods worshipped: the god of light, the king of the moon's shadow, the goddess of nature, the lord of the tides, and the king of spirits. But secretly, there used to be a 6th god, the Lord of Darkness. That being was called the Immortal Entity and stood as the most dominant force among the 6. His power let him rule unchecked, doing whatever he pleased. He bestowed dark gifts to his most devoted followers, twisting them into Soul Reapers to carry out his divine will. Under his savage rule, Soul Reapers unleashed plague, slaughtered thousands, and bent the dead into servitude, wrecking entire lands. Eventually, the kingdoms fought back, burned his temples to rubble, and reduced all written traces of him to ashes. From then on, Soul Reapers were killed on sight, and their powers were banned as taboo. Doug recalled a time when a Soul Reaper poisoned him in battle, a wound that tormented him for 10 years and nearly finished him off, until Lin Yuan came into the picture. Lin Yuan reflected that in his past life he'd been nothing but a sorcerer, and he never once guessed that behind mythic tales, such dark truths were hiding. No wonder Soul Reapers got banned, and luckily, he had kept things low profile. The situation was spiraling though, since he thought clearing the evil points would let him quietly investigate the badge mystery in the main city. Now, it looked like unless he found a way to block the Lord of Darkness's aura soon, he risked blowing his cover instantly. He then asked Doug if there was any method to bypass the darkness perception used by the Knights of the Black Scorpions. Doug said there was, but only if Quincy decided to lend a hand, which was risky, since once Quincy uncovered who he truly was, he would absolutely strike to kill. After all, a Soul Reaper had murdered the woman Quincy loved, so Doug warned him to steer far away from the guy. Lin Yuan was left blank. After a bit, he reached the gravel desert. The system let him know he had returned. 10 minutes earlier, Doug had flared up, demanding whether he'd lost his mind by heading to Quincy, vowing to rip any Soul Reaper limb from limb. Lin Yuan responded that he didn't have any other options. Now, he figured if he kept dragging that ominous aura around, even stepping foot outside the main city would be a nightmare, so the problem needed a fix fast. Then, arrows flew straight at him. He caught those in an instant. He twisted away to avoid them. More came raining down, and the surprise rattled him. A fresh wave of alarm hit when he spotted the Bloodscar Guild up ahead. They were charging his way. Huang Fei Long shouted that after scouring that broken place with their men for days, they had finally cornered the lowlife. Last time, the guy slipped out of his grip, but now he had 30-plus brothers backing him up. They were ready to deliver a brutal end. Huang Feihu added that once his head dropped, he should make sure to scream louder, just to entertain him. A bug zipped lazily through the air above the area. Its eyes, cold and unblinking, doubled as cameras. People in the real world instantly got notified that the Bloodstained Guild they had been watching was already streaming. Huang Feihu laughed and remarked that all the esteemed viewers were lucky enough to witness the live stream in real time. Right then, he promised they would present them with a spectacular show on how to slowly tear someone apart piece by piece. The current viewers spiked, climbing sharply from 88 to 212. In an office, one of the workers muttered in disbelief, asking if the Bloodstained Guild had really started streaming again. A viewer pointed out that it was over 30 against 1, and pressed to know who that poor unlucky soul was to get tangled up with those bastards. Another viewer remarked that the guy looked kinda familiar, while someone else gushed that the kid was really handsome, though unfortunately his end seemed inevitable. On the live stream, Lin Wen declared that they were nothing but wild dogs, not even enough to serve as a warm-up, but since they were all rushing to offer him their heads, he'd gladly accept every single one. One viewer blurted out that he was unbelievably bold, while another demanded the Bloodstained Guild repeat what was just said, and someone else admitted he seemed kind of handsome, while yet another joked there were seeds and drinks for sale up front to enjoy the coming bloodbath. Huang Fei Long barked that everyone should get him. The guild charged at Lin Yuan without hesitation. a mage unleashed a surge of electric power. An archer locked his aim and drew his arrow at him. Close-range combatants hurled themselves forward to close the distance. The system chimed, notifying him that the Sucker Punch judgment was in effect, and during the counterattack duration of 15 minutes, killing attackers wouldn't add to his sin points. He scoffed that 15 minutes was plenty of time to kill all of them over 3 times. Then he called out to his undead legion, ordering them to come out and take a walk. His summons emerged from the void, roaring with a ferocity that rattled the air. He dismissed the mage's electric display as nothing more than sparks and challenged them on daring to call it thunder. Then he ordered the Thunder Scorpion to poison them. Huang Feilong demanded everyone's attention, commanding all warriors to fall back and form a shield wall while mages focused their fire, and rogues and archers were to start skirmishing. They lined up swiftly in formation. The mages slammed their staffs into the ground. They invoked Reinforce. They pooled their electrifying energy into a single pulsating staff. One mage screamed as he channeled the gathered energy straight into the undead. Blinding bolts of lightning exploded through the battlefield. The undead legion staggered under the impact. Huang Feilong immediately ordered the archers to fire their arrows. The undead legion took another brutal hit. The current viewers dipped to 168. One viewer scoffed, asking if they were right in thinking those summons were nothing more than cake for an elite squad of level 7 or 8. Another announced they were leaving. Another sneered that it was just another newbie trying to show off. Someone else declared the betting pool open, and another urged everyone to bet on how many minutes the kid would last. Back in the fight, Huang Feilong spat that it didn't matter if Lin Yuan could summon the undead because even if he summoned that thing from last time, under their relentless assault, it would still end up as a pile of rotten meat. And Huang Feihu chimed in that he would perish that day. But Lin Yuan tilted his head and asked them if they really believed that. Huang Feilong demanded to know if he was actually smiling. One of the viewers cursed suddenly, demanding to know what was happening. The sand beneath the mage's feet started to shift unnaturally. They faltered, confused, and then the ground exploded as sand burst upward toward them. Screams ripped through the formation as they called desperately for help. The warriors tensed instantly, unease crawling over them. Out of nowhere, a kobold erupted from beneath the sand. The mages shrieked as one after another got smashed by vicious strikes. Someone yelled that it only took one hit and urged everyone to retreat quickly. The warriors screamed as more kobolds clawed their way out and tore into them with wild ferocity. Huang Feihu froze, horrified. Huang Feilong stiffened, alarmed. The viewer count skyrocketed to 302, and one exclaimed that it was an underground ambush. Another questioned if the undead were coordinating attacks too. Someone mocked whoever claimed they were just a piece of cake to come out and get beaten. Another jeered about who had bragged earlier about tearing him apart, and another laughed that the ground was now littered with their pieces. One of the mages warned everyone to watch out, saying the wounds were poisoned and they needed to purify first before healing. But their warning ended abruptly as they were blown to bits. Lin Yuan directed his crushing aura straight at them and detonated them into nothingness. A ripple in space warped open behind Lin Yuan. Without sparing a glance, he lunged backward and drove his sword straight into the distortion. The rogue blurted out, demanding how he knew. Lin Yuan remarked that he wasn't dumb enough to miss someone trying to go invisible on shifting sand. Meanwhile, the guild muttered grimly that the undead were unbelievably strong. The front line had already collapsed, so they warned everyone to pull back. Huang Feihu exploded in fury. He spat curses and barked that Lin Yuan was useless trash. He vowed that he would cut him down himself. Lin Yuan locked eyes on him, then he curled his lips into a smirk as his sword shimmered into his grip. He taunted him to give it a try. With a flick of his hand, he unleashed the Azure Soul Curse seal. Huang Feihu faltered when a ring of grinning skulls erupted around him. He demanded to know what the hell that was. His body seemed to hang stiff in midair, locked within the skull's grip. Lin Yuan blurred forward and slashed with Seaver. Huang Feihu slammed onto the ground. Lin Yuan touched down right after him. Huang Feilong stood frozen, staring as his guildmates screamed for help and thrashed uselessly. He wondered if his mind was playing tricks on him. Lin Yuan felt like a completely different existence, even though only a few days had passed since they last crossed paths. Just by standing there, he radiated the dread of a demon clawing up from hell. Lin Yuan's gaze shifted toward him. Huang Feilong begged him not to kill him. Lin Yuan wrenched his sword free from a guild member's lifeless body. He stalked toward Huang Feilong. He promised it was his turn to savor despair. He hurled his sword, driving it straight into his head. He declared that it was over. Then the sharp hum of a flying bug caught his ears. He spotted it circling, spying on him. He muttered that he almost forgot about it. The bug detonated into shrapnel a moment later. He murmured that silence had returned. Elsewhere, back on planet Earth, Huang Feihu sulked inside a lavish mansion. One viewer on the stream cursed and demanded why the boss blew up the surveillance bug. Another asked if anyone knew who the boss even was, while someone claimed they did. They insisted he was the same one who killed the giant death wolf, and that they'd seen it happen firsthand. Another pressed to know where the boss was now, saying they wanted to meet him face to face. Someone guessed he was in the gravel desert, and another mentioned that the Mercenary Guild had already issued an S-Class invitation. Huang Feihu seethed harder at Lin Yuan's name. Meanwhile, back in Eternal Black Sand Town, Quincy stayed slouched in his home, half-drunk. Lin Yuan stepped inside. Quincy groaned that it was him again. He wasn't teaching today since the coin for wine was already settled, but Lin Yuan replied that he came to talk, canceling his profession concealment in the same breath. The forbidden mark of his Soul Reaper identity flared into view instantly. Quincy stiffened and blurted out if he really was a Soul Reaper. Quincy unleashed his energy and drove it into the shattered jars of wine, twisting the shards into deadly weapons aimed straight at Lin Yuan. But Lin Yuan dodged every flying fragment with impossible precision. Quincy blinked hard, rattled by the sheer speed he'd just witnessed. Before he could process it, Lin Yuan was already right in front of him, sudden as a ghost. With a sharp swing, he shattered the remaining shards in a single strike, the fragments raining harmlessly to the ground. He leveled his sword at Quincy without hesitation. Quincy froze where he stood, his breath locked tight in his chest. Lin Yuan told him it was time to talk calmly. Quincy demanded to know exactly what he wanted. Lin Yuan recalled the moment when Doug had muttered that since he was so hell-bent on going, he should treat that little threat of information as a favor being returned. Once, when the Dark Lord's arrogance had swelled unchecked, countless worlds had collapsed into endless despair. To uphold justice, a fierce battle erupted between a Soul Reaper, Quincy, and his wife. After brutal bloodshed, the Soul Reaper fell, and his wife, desperate to save the gravely wounded Quincy, succumbed to the curse of the undead. Her soul became tainted by darkness, twisting her into a beast stripped of memory, condemned to eternal torment without salvation. The only way to end the curse and free her was to destroy her corrupted soul with his own hands. But ever since that battle, Quincy's wounds had left him too broken to even grip his sword properly. Everyone assumed he'd waste away in drink and despair, drowning himself to numb the grief. But one day, he stunned everyone by announcing a mysterious quest. He promised that anyone who stood for justice and managed to save his wife would earn the treasures he had amassed over his lifetime. And for the Soul Reapers, he offered the key to decipher the Dark Perception, a secret treasure taken from the fallen Soul Reaper's body. He'd intended to use those spoils as bait, hoping both to free his wife and exact vengeance on the remaining Soul Reapers for their blood debt. Yet out of the 158 who had accepted the quest, not a single one had survived. Back in the present, Lin Yuan pressed Quincy to explain what the quest truly was. Quincy finally admitted that since Lin Yuan had come willingly, he wouldn't hide it anymore, confessing that he'd been waiting far too long for someone to entertain his beloved wife in her cruel little game. The system then notified Lin Yuan that he had discovered Quincy's quest, Soul of the Deceased Wife, where he would help Quincy's wife find release and let her rest in peace, all within a time limit of 10 days, and it asked if he would accept. Lin Yuan accepted without hesitation. Quincy wished him luck, adding coldly that no one could say if he'd actually succeed in surviving his quest. Then, with a dark twist of humor, he thought that would only matter if Lin Yuan's corpse could crawl back while it was still intact. Moments later, Lin Yuan arrived at the northern edge of Black Sand Town, standing before the shadowed gates of the Mourner's Sanctum. He walked into the gloom, his boots crunching softly against the cold stone of the corridor. He drank a night vision potion, letting its effect sharpen the darkness. Soon after, he summoned 2 kobolds, their torches hissing softly as they took point, while the Thunder Scorpion guarded his rear. He knew the Mourner's Sanctum stretched across 5 sprawling floors, serving as the resting place for every NPC who died in Black Sand Town. Without warning, a zombie clawed its way out of a coffin and unleashed a feral roar. Lin Yuan didn't even flinch as the Thunder Scorpion lunged and tore it apart effortlessly. He noted grimly that undead like zombies, skeletons, and ghosts wandered these halls at random intervals. Each floor grew more dangerous than the last, the first filled with low-level zombies from levels 1 to 3. The second floor crawled with skeleton monsters between levels 4 and 6. The third floor swirled with ghosts, their levels ranging from 7 to 9. As for the fourth, it belonged to the ghouls, merciless beasts at level 10. The kobolds halted before the portal, waiting silently for his command. Lin Yuan exhaled and told them it was time. They would break through the first 4 floors in one go. Lin Yuan finally reached the 4th level of the Mourner's Sanctum, his steps cautious as he eyed the dim expanse ahead with sharp wariness. He kept scanning the shadows, tense, before muttering that he thought he heard something deeper inside. A ghoul suddenly skittered sideways and activated its wall running without warning. Almost instantly, the other ghouls erupted into motion and triggered their suspended rend as if answering some silent call. Dozens of level 10 elite ghouls crowded the narrow passage, their twisted bodies writhing with malicious intent. In unison, they bared jagged teeth and unleashed their corrupting venom bite, venom dripping in viscous threads. Lin Yuan clenched his jaw and declared that it was time to attack. His undead thunder scorpion reacted immediately, activating its earth-rending pincer with a sharp grinding snap. The beast darted forward with shocking speed and lunged into the horde without hesitation. Its heavy tail lashed out in a wide arc, striking multiple ghouls at once with bone-crushing force. Lin Yuan spat out that they should just die already. He surged forward like a storm, slicing through one ghoul after another with relentless precision. The air filled with raw, guttural screams as he passed through them, his strikes leaving nothing but carnage behind. By the time he charged past, the ghouls behind him had been shredded into pieces, their bodies collapsing into bloody heaps on the cold floor. Only one survived the slaughter, dragging itself across the ground and crawling desperately toward him. He frowned and muttered that he almost missed that one. The system's voice rang out coldly, congratulating him for leveling up to level 12. He noted with some surprise that it was faster than he expected. Too bad, though, that dark summoning could only revive and control corpses and had zero effect on wandering spirits. Then, without warning, a dense, oppressive dark energy swirled into existence right behind him. He stiffened instantly, alarm flashing through him as he noticed the shift. The dark energy coalesced before violently releasing a concentrated beam straight at him. He reacted on instinct, swinging his sword in a clean arc and splitting the attack in half. But to his shock, the severed dark beam didn't dissipate. It curved around him and swirled like a living thing. In the blink of an eye, the dark energy consumed him whole. Moments later, he was violently expelled into a strange altar. The sensation disorienting but brief. The dark energy spat him out, and he landed hard but steady, managing to plant both feet firmly on the cold stone floor. He immediately scanned his surroundings, alert and ready for whatever came next. Above him, a chained box swayed ominously in the stale air, drawing his attention instantly. He muttered under his breath that the entire area had shifted into something else. Inside the box, a level 18 boss, the vengeful corpse spirit, lurched and laughed with an unhinged hunger. She let out a sharp, eerie laugh and declared that she had been waiting far too long for him to arrive. With a burst of power, the box exploded violently, shredding the chains that restrained it. She hissed with twisted glee, exclaiming that finally there was fresh flesh and blood before her. Lin Yuan's expression darkened as he realized he had unknowingly stepped onto the 5th floor. She shrieked that she would tear him to pieces, her voice ringing with venom. Her claws shot forward like blades, forcing him to react instantly and raise his sword to block the strike. She shifted without pause and activated her corpse bloom, her body pulsing with grotesque energy. He leapt back instinctively, and her thorny vines slammed into the ground where he had been standing. More vines burst forth, lashing wildly as she directed them straight at him with relentless fury. He squinted, wondering if the liquid coating them carried a poisonous, corrosive edge. His grip tightened around his sword, both hands locking into place with grim determination. He growled that an attack like that was useless against him. With a single brutal swing, he unleashed a powerful strike, slicing through all the vines in one sweeping motion. Lin Yuan leaped into the air while the vengeful corpse spirit's vines still hadn't recovered from being sliced apart. Moving with quick precision to avoid any entanglement, he swung his sword up in time to block the spray of corrosive, poisonous liquid, the metallic clash ringing sharp and heavy. Her skin cracked like dried earth, fissures spreading unnaturally across the pale surface. She flared with raw fury, her rage palpable in the air. She unleashed her banshee's wail, a shrill, bone-chilling cry that reverberated through the chamber. He initially figured it might be some massive, wide-ranged AoE skill, but then it clicked. It was actually a summon. Behind the sealed doors, disturbing inhuman noises echoed faintly, growing louder by the second. Heavy, rhythmic banging slammed against the doors, rattling them violently. Lin Yuan's pulse spiked as unease churned in his chest. Without warning, a skeletal hand shattered through the door's rotting wood, claws scraping against the frame. He tensed up instantly, nerves tight, bracing himself for the nightmare to come. He considered grimly whether these could be the buried NPCs of Black Sand Town clawing their way back. Then another thought hit him. Besides the original townsfolk, every challenger who failed Quincy's quest might also be trapped here beneath the soil. He cursed under his breath and demanded if she intended to resurrect them all. Skeletal monsters screeched hideously as they dragged themselves free from their graves, bones clattering together. Lin Yuan muttered that there were far too many, and it rattled him since he never anticipated that boss to have the power to resurrect an entire mountain of bones. He barked for his undead legion to pour out and intercept them immediately. They had to hold the gates against those bastards no matter what. He resolved coldly that he'd use them as cannon fodder to stall the overwhelming swarm for now. The massive thunder scorpion anchored itself before one of the doors, its pincers raised like jagged steel traps. He snapped the command to trigger the bloodlust state without hesitation. The kobold leader's whip cracked, striking the undead troops, and they erupted into a frenzy, their bloodlust state ignited. Lin Yuan's sharp gaze locked on the kobold leader and the crystal thunder scorpion as he issued his next order. Both were to launch an all-out attack without holding back. The crystal thunder scorpion lunged forward, unleashing its earth-rending claw with destructive force. At the same time, the kobold leader hurled himself forward, swinging down its heavy strike like a warhammer. The vengeful corpse spirit retreated sharply, springing backward to evade the deadly blows. But then, the ceiling groaned and split apart, chunks of stone crashing down in an avalanche. She froze for a moment, startled by the sudden collapse overhead. Enormous rocks rained upon her, but they phased straight through as though she weren't even there. Lin Yuan's breath caught in surprise, his mind racing. He pieced it together. Wandering spirits belonged to the ghost-type monster family, meaning their bodies could slip through structures and they were immune to nearly half of all physical attacks. But he reminded himself sharply that ghost types also suffered double damage from magic assaults. He instantly summoned his skulls and activated the Azure Soul Curse seal, lashing out with spectral energy. Yet she didn't so much as flinch. Utterly unfazed by the damage inflicted, he realized with a jolt that her speed had abruptly spiked, her movements now unnervingly fast. Meanwhile, the summoned corpses relentlessly battered the doors, forcing their way inch by inch. Lin Yuan calculated grimly that the NPC corpses could breach the undead legion's defenses at any moment, so the fight had to be finished quickly. He needed to lock down her movement before she overwhelmed them. Clutching the paralysis ring tightly, he slipped it onto his finger without hesitation. Then he lunged straight at her, aura crackling as he charged in full force. The additional paralysis poison surged through the ring, fully activated and primed to strike. The vengeful corpse spirit took a direct hit from the paralysis poison, the venom sinking deep and locking her movements tight. The system instantly notified Lin Yuan that the target had been struck, and the paralysis poison successfully activated. He remarked sharply that it was not over yet, his tone edged with focus. She was struck next by the Azure Soul Curse seal, the mark searing into her as its power bound her spirit. She crashed violently against the wall, the impact echoing through the chamber. He landed smoothly on the ground after delivering his relentless combo attack. She slid from the dented wall and crashed down onto the cold stone floor. He muttered that it was excellent, satisfaction threading through his words. He observed keenly, just as expected, that after being hit once by the Azure Soul Curse seal, her speed had slowed considerably, and then he unleashed the evil wolf's howl. The system promptly notified him that the skill had been activated. She groaned harshly in pain, and the system confirmed that the target had been stunned. He declared that although the stun only lasted 5 seconds, it was more than enough time. They would see exactly how many of his blows she could endure. Although his strikes were small, she suffered continuous successive damage from every one of them. She grew enraged, biting her lip hard until it bled. She then screamed furiously as her overwhelming dark aura burst outward, leaking into the air. The system abruptly warned him that the boss had activated the corpse explosion art. The corpses piled behind the doors exploded in a brutal chain reaction. The undead legion was engulfed in the devastating blast. A few moments later, the dust from the explosion began settling, clouding the wreckage. Lin Yuan had used his undead legion to shield his body from the deadly blast. He realized grimly that it was indeed the corpse explosion art, and that the monster had intended to detonate the NPC corpses directly to destroy the entire tomb chamber. Among his undead legion, only 3 remained, marking a heavy and costly loss. He then strode toward the vengeful corpse spirit, determination solid in his steps. He stated flatly that it was time to finish her off. She should vanish completely. He channeled his Azure Soul Curse seal again and launched another crushing attack against her. She screamed in despair and shouted no as the strike tore through her. The system instantly notified him that she had entered a near-death state and her HP had already dropped to 300. Her HP continued plummeting to 200, then 30, until it reached nothing. Her body was obliterated entirely and it vanished into nothingness. The system congratulated Lin Yuan for slaying the vengeful corpse spirit and informed him that he had gained 800 experience points. He landed softly back on the ground, his chest rising with exhaustion. He asked faintly if it was finally over. Suddenly, he noticed soul fragments gathering silently behind him, forming a gentle glow. A mage appeared, thanking him and addressing him as a brave human. She was Quincy's wife, and she smiled at him bitterly, her sorrow lingering in the air. She handed him an item with trembling hands before fading away completely. The system announced that it was the Ethereal Ring of Love, a quest item that could not be dropped or sold. the very engagement ring Quincy had once given to his wife, a symbol of their enduring love. He wondered with mild frustration if that ring was truly the only reward for killing such a boss. Suddenly, a skill book materialized in front of him, glowing faintly. He stared at it, intrigued, and asked curiously what it was. Lin Yuan figured he didn't expect that the corpse explosion art used by the vengeful spirit turned out to be a skill exclusive to Soul Reapers. He wondered if maybe it was because the one who sealed her before had been one of the Dark Lord's trusted confidants. The system then notified him that the skill book was being automatically recorded straight into his memory. He gladly accepted the shiny new skill without hesitation. The system reported that the corpse explosion art was at level 1, allowing him to detonate a single corpse, causing fire damage to nearby enemies equal to 20% of his HP. He figured that although the skill burned through corpse supplies, its effect on both attack power and range turned out unexpectedly good, which gave him a pleasant jolt of surprise. The next day, Lin Yuan made his way back to Black Sand Town. Quincy pressed if it was the engagement ring he'd given her back then. He explained that sealed spirits carried no memories, and only after being freed would they regain them and drop the item they cherished most in life. He asked softly if his wife hadn't been in too much pain when she passed, and Lin Yuan assured him she hadn't. The engagement ring gleamed faintly in Quincy's hands as he held it like something impossibly fragile. He recalled the bright smile of his wife as if it were still right there. He admitted that it made him genuinely happy. He never expected that the one thing he hated most, a Soul Reaper, would end up helping him fulfill his deepest wish, and he vowed to keep that favor buried deep within his heart. He then summoned a heavy chest right in front of him. He stated firmly that it was finally time to fulfill his promise. The Crown of Darkness would make his sin value completely invisible, hide his dark aura, and render it undetectable, and it counted as part of the exclusive Soul Reaper equipment that could neither be sold nor destroyed. Lin Yuan figured that although it didn't provide any bonus stats, concealing his sin value and dark aura was exactly what he needed right now. And since he'd already resolved the Manticore Knits problem, he no longer had to limit his movements within the main city. The system then prompted him, asking if he wished to use the Crown of Darkness. He confirmed, without hesitation. A magic circle spun rapidly across his body, and a dark fire swirled around him like a living shadow. He murmured that he finally obtained it and wondered if this meant he'd taken one step closer to uncovering the truth. The next day, the system greeted him upon entering the main city of Wind and Sand. He figured there were countless large and small guilds scattered across the city of Wind and Sand, but the ones that could be counted as real powers were only 10. He wondered faintly if that person could be hiding among them. He admitted that right now he was just another newcomer in Wind and Sand, so breaking into those major guild circles wouldn't be easy. It seemed he'd have to bide his time and look for the right opportunity first. Suddenly, he caught on that someone was tailing him from behind. He immediately slipped into a sharp turn, ducking away from the crowded street. Han Qing rushed after him without missing a beat, but when he rounded the corner, he was stunned to find Lin Yuan nowhere in sight. Suddenly, Lin Yuan's blade pressed coldly against his neck. He demanded to know who he was. Han Qing blurted out that he finally tracked him down. It really was Mr. Yuan. Lin Yuan instinctively darted to the side and Han Qing toppled onto the ground. Lin Yuan pressed him again, asking who he was. Han Qing explained that he still remembered him clearly. Lin Yuan questioned if he actually knew his name. Han Qing confirmed he did, explaining that when he saw the Bloodstained Guild's broadcast, he recognized him immediately. He combed through tens of thousands of comments just to hunt down a clue about him. Then, he even dropped $2 million upgrading the group's latest facial recognition system to make absolutely sure it was him. Lin Yuan pressed if he seriously spent $2 million just to track him down. Han Qing asked if that amount was supposed to be a lot, casually pointing out that their Han group usually burned several million just for routine system testing. Lin Yuan wondered if this Han group really was that multi-hundred-billion-dollar giant dominating the global high-tech market, and just what else someone with that kind of background knew. Debating if maybe he should just finish him off right there and then. Han Qing insisted that Lin Yuan should join his team because there was going to be an S-rank hunt in the Molten Bloodscale Cave the next day, dropping the detail with a tone that made it sound like a big deal. It was mentioned that someone had stumbled upon the lair of a corroded iron hyena, which only added weight to his pitch. But before he could get another word out, he clumsily tripped and smacked the ground hard, leaving Lin Yuan utterly speechless at the sight. Lin Yuan stated flatly that he should leave and stop following him around, while silently wondering why he was even wasting breath arguing with such an idiot. Han Qing laughed it off and remarked that he was right. Someone of his caliber, who crushed the Bloodstained Guild's elite squad like smashing watermelons, didn't really need a team anyway. However, he added that the third team from the Black Tree Guild would be attending the hunt to pick rookies. So if Lin Yuan performed exceptionally, there might still be a chance worth taking. Lin Yuan recalled with mild interest that the Black Tree Guild currently ranked 10th. Han Qing muttered that it looks like he could only go and try his luck alone. Lin Yuan pressed him for the exact time of the hunt. Han Qing froze, clearly caught off guard by the question. Lin Yuan repeated himself sharply, demanding to know exactly when the hunt would begin. Han Qing finally explained that it would start the next day at 8 a.m. and asked carefully if that meant Mr. Yuan was agreeing to join. Lin Yuan corrected him, telling him to just call him Lin Yuan, but he added that they needed to make proper preparations before setting off. Han Qing stared at him, visibly puzzled by the sudden shift. A short while later, Lin Yuan arrived at the Vulture Bandits' camp. A thunderous explosion tore through the area, shaking the ground beneath his feet. He muttered that the leader should be somewhere up ahead. Exhaling slowly, he steadied himself and summoned a group of level 12 undead Vulture Bandits. He ordered them to launch a joint attack. Up ahead, a cluster of Vulture Bandits had surrounded their boss, rallying together with fierce battle cries. In a rush of adrenaline, they charged forward with wild aggression. Lin Yuan commanded the undead to strike. The undead Vulture Bandits clashed violently with the living Vulture Bandits, their fight erupting into a brutal frenzy. One of the Vulture Bandits unleashed its scimitar throw skill, aiming the spinning blade directly at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan didn't even flinch, standing motionless and unbothered. The moment the weapon struck the ground, his figure vanished entirely. The Vulture Bandit froze in shock, unable to process what just happened. Lin Yuan's cold voice rang out as he declared that he would take their souls. The system quickly notified him that he had successfully slain 3 Vulture Bandit leaders. He kept pressing forward, striking them down one after another until the system confirmed 10 Vulture Bandit leaders had been eliminated. When the last corpse hit the ground, the battlefield fell eerily silent around him. But then he paused, baffled, as he looked toward where the boss had been moments ago. He thought the boss had simply vanished. Out of nowhere, the level 19 Vulture Bandit Lord reappeared right behind him. It lunged forward, activating its backstab with lethal intent. Lin Yuan instantly responded by casting his corpse explosion art without hesitation. He snarled that the thing should die. A cold glint flared in his eyes as his gaze flicked sharply over his shoulder. In the next instant, a massive explosion erupted behind him, engulfing the battlefield in fire and chaos. The Vulture Lord screamed furiously as he tore through the chaos, darting away from the explosion with desperate speed. Lin Yuan lunged forward without hesitation, his body moving like a striking shadow. The Vulture Lord staggered when Lin Yuan appeared right before him in an instant, caught completely off guard. He barked out that he should take it. In the same breath, Lin Yuan's shadow gloves flared to life. He snarled that the Vulture Lord should go to hell. The next moment, the Vulture Lord slammed hard into the ground, his body crumpling under the force. The system chimed almost instantly, notifying Lin Yuan that he had slain the Vulture Bandit Lord. As he declared it was finally over, another prompt popped up, congratulating him for reaching level 13. His skill, Curse of Darkness, surged to level 3. Corpse Explosion. Art advanced to level 2. Lin Yuan stood still, his eyes scanning through the cascade of system notifications. He recalled when the system had asked if he wanted to use a skill scroll to upgrade the skill, and he had agreed without hesitation. Back in the present, he muttered that the efficiency wasn't bad at all. He had used a skill scroll once before to boost Curse of Darkness and had pushed it straight to level 3. And now, he had managed to elevate Corpse Explosion Art as well. As for his Undead Legion, he figured it was sufficient for now. The system then confirmed he had obtained 130 undead monsters in total. Among them were level 15 Vulture Bandit leaders and the formidable level 19 Vulture Bandit Lord. He paused, wondering if the Vulture Bandit Lord would gain a new skill after being revived. He remembered that when the giant Death Wolf had been revived last time, it had unlocked a terrifying new ability, Wraith's Fury. That thought stirred his curiosity. Could it be that reviving Lord-level monsters always granted them additional skills? It seemed intriguing enough to test. The system interrupted his musing, notifying him that the hunting campaign he had joined would officially commence in 2 hours. A grin curved across his lips. He declared that they should get ready to move out. Moments later, Lin Yuan arrived at the Melted Bloodscale Cave and caught sight of Han Qing's outfit. He immediately questioned what Han Qing was wearing, wondering if he was disguised as a Golden Knight statue. Han Qing explained that he had spent 50 gold coins to commission a master blacksmith to forge that super heavy armor, assuring him that he wouldn't be a burden today. Right then, his belt gave way with a sharp snap. Both of them froze when Han Qing's pants dropped straight to the ground. Speechlessness hung heavy between them. Lin Yuan finally remarked that it was the first time he had ever seen such a segmented armor style. It was undeniably unique. Han Qing countered that the blacksmith had claimed it was the latest design. Suddenly, the visor on his helmet slammed shut on its own. Han Qing panicked, stammering that they should wait because he couldn't see a thing. and pleaded with Lin Yuan to save him. In his flailing, he tripped over another man's foot. His helmeted head smacked hard against his chest plate, making the hinge on his visor snap loose. When his vision cleared, he froze in shock. Standing over him, looming like a shadow, was Zhao Kui, his sharp gaze locked with deadly precision. Zhao Kui, the level 15 third team captain of the Black Tree Guild, stared down at him and demanded to know if Han Qing was all right. Han Qing figured Zhao Kui was clearly smiling, yet he couldn't shake off the sharp unease curling in his chest, as if a venomous snake had its cold gaze fixed on him, and he wondered if it was just his imagination running wild. Out of nowhere, Lin Yuan yanked him backward from behind. He pressed him about why he wasn't taking that ridiculous gear off already, and Han Qing admitted he was right. Lin Yuan's movement snagged Zhao Kui's attention. He was glaring at him with pure hostility. In Zhao Kui's head, he was challenging him, wondering how he dared to look at him like that, and he labeled him an irritating nuisance. Suddenly, a member of the Black Tree Guild addressed Lin Yuan and Han Qing. He wanted to know which one of them went by Han Qing. His gaze dropped to the application form in his hand. He swept his eyes over the players standing before him. He asked if he was right to assume Han Qing was the one decked out in bizarre clothes. He mocked his taste, throwing in that flashy golden getup as proof, and he jabbed that he must think this was some over-the-top cosplay convention. Han Qing confirmed it was him, and guessed that the three of them were the big brothers from the Black Tree Guild. He was about to introduce his friend when the guild member suddenly pointed his sword at him. He cut him off sharply, making it clear they weren't interested in rookie names, and told him to remember well that the reason they let him bring someone wasn't about some double registration fee. It was purely because their captain was unusually generous. Lin Yuan stayed silent, though a quiet displeasure tightened his expression. Zhao Kui interjected, asking what they were doing and saying they should treat their new friends kindly, and the member brushed it off, claiming he was only joking. He slid his sword back into its sheath. He warned them not to get carried away. Just because their captain spoke kindly, they should treasure the chance they'd been given. And after asking if they understood, Han Qing answered that they did, and promised they would give their all. Then one of the guild members called for everyone to stand in their assigned spots as he prepared to start the roll call officially. Han Qing muttered that the tension was suffocating, and admitted he never thought he'd actually get to work alongside a major guild, while Lin Yuan quietly wondered if these were the players lined up for the S-rank hunting campaign. One of the players teased that he hoped that gear of his wouldn't fail him in the middle of the raid. Lin Yuan figured most of them looked like fresh newbies who had just arrived in the main city. Zhao Kui announced that their numbers were complete and said there was no time to waste, urging everyone to get ready to move out. He assured them that even the Grim Reaper would turn away upon seeing the Black Tree Guild, so they had nothing to fear. Everyone responded with agreement. A player flinched when he spotted Han Qing pulling out a red flag. Han Qing urged Lin Yuan to hurry up because he'd heard there were luminous slime monsters inside that cave, and the player scoffed, asking if the guy thought this was some kind of picnic. Lin Yuan calmly trailed behind the group. He remarked that he could already catch the scent and that it was exhilarating. They all stepped into the melted blood-scale cave. A short while later, one of the players asked if there was already a fork ahead. Another pointed out they hadn't encountered a single Iron Eater lizard yet, and another explained that it was normal since the species was nocturnal and likely hiding deep within the caves to rest during the day. Someone asked Zhao Kui which path he thought they should take. Zhao Kui replied that in his opinion splitting up would be best. Another player hesitated, questioning if they should really divide, while Han Qing protested that it sounded dangerous, and another agreed, asking what they would do if they ran into a level 16 elite monster. A guild member told them to quiet down and calm themselves, explaining that to secure their safety on this mission, their captain had already scouted the route ahead, and when they met them earlier, they had just wrapped up scouting and were resting for the assembly. One of the players asked if Zhao Kui himself had scouted in advance. Zhao Kui confirmed it, explaining that based on their morning sweep, the middle path showed clear signs of Iron Eater lizard pheromones, meaning a surprise attack risk was high, while the other two routes were relatively safe. But since the most dangerous places usually hid the most valuable finds, to balance efficiency with safety, he'd decided their guild would take the middle path, while the others should split between the two side routes. He asked for their thoughts. A player admired that major guilds always had such well-thought-out plans, while another pointed out that Zhao Kui was the third team captain of the Black Tree Guild and the highest level among them, so his word should be treated as command. Lin Yuan announced they would take the left path. Zhao Kui agreed and asked if anyone wanted to go with them. One player hesitated, asking if it would just be those two, while another doubted their reliability, pointing out that one of them looked eccentric and the other was a stone-faced monster, probably hiding his level and class out of embarrassment. But another player piped up, saying she actually found him pretty handsome, and someone else teased her to go with him then. Zhao Kui noted that Lin Yuan's popularity was apparently suffering and admitted that even as the mission leader, he couldn't force anyone. Lin Yuan told Han Qing to follow him. and Han Qing agreed. Zhao Kui watched the two of them head off toward the left path. He clicked his tongue and muttered that the two of them were ignorant fools. Water was dripping down the stalactites, each drop hitting the cave floor with a faint, rhythmic plink that echoed through the cavern. They then fell to the ground, splashing tiny beads that vanished into the damp earth. Lin Yuan and Han Qing were walking together, their steps steady as the eerie glow of the luminous slime monsters lit up their winding path. Han Qing remarked that the temperature was dropping unnaturally fast and admitted he felt like something was off. He also muttered about the unsettling sensation of being watched, noting with unease that the feeling kept growing heavier with every step. Lin Yuan pressed him if he finally noticed and confirmed that something was indeed lurking out there. Han Qing questioned him, wondering if Zhao Kui hadn't claimed he scouted the path and that it was supposed to be safe. Lin Yuan countered sharply, asking if he trusted him that much, and reminded him this was an S-rank hunting campaign. Bringing along so many newbies made it obvious they were being used as bait to scout the danger ahead. Han Qing was about to demand why he hadn't exposed Zhao Kui, but before he could finish, Lin Yuan completed the thought for him without hesitation. He then reached out and grabbed a luminous slime clinging to the wall, its glow sliding across his fingers. He explained casually that it was because, coincidentally, he also wanted to see just how many interesting things could be lured out this way. They stood still after that, staring into the oppressive darkness stretching out ahead of them. Suddenly, multiple glaring eyes pierced through the black, and their faint reflections flickered ominously. They were level 16 iron eater lizards, their scales rough, and their heavy frames shifting restlessly. On the other hand, the guild's mage rammed his staff into the ground without hesitation. He then unleashed his burn, and fire roared out in a spiraling blaze, searing the lizards clustered ahead. The swordsman guild member stepped forward, swinging his blade in a vicious arc that split another lizard cleanly. He laughed harshly, calling the creatures idiots and urging everyone to attack so they could witness his strength firsthand. He then glanced at their captain, remarking smugly that with those scapegoats drawing aggro and scattering the monster's strength, everything had become much easier, and he couldn't believe they actually fell for the lie about scouting the path. Zhao Kui responded coolly, saying that once most of them were dead, the Iron Eater lizards in the other two caves would also be worn down to the brink of death. That would be when they'd move in, he added, so they could swoop in to reap the rewards and achieve double the results with half the effort. 3 lizards suddenly lunged at him from behind, claws tearing into the air. He scoffed at them, calling them ill-mannered beasts, and while questioning who they thought they were screaming at, he barked for all of them to come at him together. He slammed his weapon against the lizards in brutal succession, each strike reverberating with a sharp, metallic crack. He spat that scum like them should always stay crushed at the bottom of the food chain. Meanwhile, Han Qing glanced sideways, still reeling at Lin Yuan's composure amid the chaos. One of the lizards whipped up its iron tail strike, its tail slicing through the air with lethal force. At the same time, one of the vulture bandits activated its scimitar throw, the curved blade flashing in a deadly arc. Another slipped into stealth and lunged in with a backstab, its dagger gleaming faintly. Han Qing blurted out, asking when Lin Yuan had managed to subdue all those undead monsters again. It was even more jaw-dropping than the previous mud swamp battle, and he couldn't help gushing about how amazing he was. Lin Yuan reminded him if he hadn't mentioned making preparations beforehand that day. Han Qing pressed him further, incredulous that he had subdued all those powerful monsters in less than a single day. The system chimed then, notifying Lin Yuan that he had successfully killed 55 Iron Eater lizards. He remarked dryly that it was already over and their efficiency wasn't bad at all. Han Qing groaned that he was insanely envious and asked when he'd ever be able to reach Lin Yuan's level of strength. Suddenly, he froze mid-sentence, asking what the rumbling was and whether it was an earthquake. He called out toward Lin Yuan instinctively, but then he reconsidered, figuring Lin Yuan was busy at the moment. So he decided it was better to check the situation himself instead because he couldn't rely on him for every little or big thing. He had to be useful too. He muttered that it seemed to be coming from that direction and headed toward the source cautiously. Suddenly, he halted in place, straining to listen. He asked softly if the vibrations had stopped. Without warning, a massive tongue shot out from the ground, coiling upward and smashing into him, sending him flying backward. He was horrified, his breath catching in sheer terror. Han Qing stood there frozen and stared at the gigantic tongue in front of him, completely baffled by the sight. He wondered what the hell that grotesque thing was, his pulse hammering hard. He braced himself instinctively when the tongue lunged straight at him like a whip. He then begged to be saved, panic twisting his voice. The tongue went in for another attack, thrashing violently toward him. He tried to call out for help, but the tongue wrapped tight around his mouth and coiled over his body, locking him in place so he couldn't move or scream. He was then dragged helplessly toward the gaping hole in the ground. He muttered that he was done for, despair settling in fast. Suddenly, Lin Yuan swung his sword in a clean, brutal arc. He remarked that it was just a beast hiding in the bowels of the earth to gnaw on dirt, and he mocked it for daring to show off its tricks before him. Blood spurted violently out of the tongue in a hot spray. He then grabbed Han Qing by the collar without warning. He ran hard and dragged him along, refusing to slow down. A few moments later, Han Qing was doubled over coughing as he addressed Lin Yuan, insisting that thing was definitely a huge monster and they had to hurry before it got out. But the ground suddenly trembled and split apart beneath them. Han Qing exclaimed that it was too late now. The level 20 iron-eating iguana boss roared ferociously, shaking the cavern. Han Qing frantically explained that the mission info said the Molten Bloodscale Cavern only housed an elite-class iron-eating iguana, but this one was clearly a boss-class monster. He apologized to Lin Yuan and admitted that if it weren't for him, Lin Yuan wouldn't have to face such a terrifying monster at that level, so he vowed to hold it off and urged him to pull back immediately. But Lin Yuan simply asked him if that was supposed to be a terrifying monster. He declared that it was his prey. The iguana charged at them with earth-shaking speed. Lin Yuan declared that they should watch closely, and he would finish it. He ordered the vulture bandit leaders to unleash their side throw. They obeyed instantly and hurled their weapons straight at the iguana. But then it activated its iron tail sweep with terrifying force. Their weapons just clanged uselessly and bounced off its tail. Lin Yuan then caught the shift and realized it created an opening. He unleashed his Azure Spirit Seal without hesitation. The iguana shrieked sharply as the strike slammed into it from behind. Lin Yuan then landed lightly on the ground. He confidently stood in front of the beast, unshaken. He spotted burns scattered across its scales. But then, he wondered grimly if the attack had only caused minor burns. The iguana opened its mouth wide and gathered its breath. It then unleashed its toxic sand breath in a sudden vicious burst. The blast exploded right above Lin Yuan. Han Qing shouted that he should watch out. The toxic sand breath splashed onto the ground with a sizzling hiss. Lin Yuan barely managed to spring aside in time, dodging it by a hair. He remarked that the thing was a highly concentrated corrosive strike, nasty enough to melt through anything. Fighting it turned out way tougher than he had anticipated. Out of nowhere, the iguana whipped its tail at him with brutal force, but he declared that this kind of danger only made the fight more thrilling. He then called out for the vulture bandit lord without hesitation. It instantly appeared, bristling with menace and ready to lunge into battle. It rammed its weapons deep into the iguana's tail, tearing through with brutal precision. The resulting impact unleashed a booming shockwave that rattled the air. Han Qing turned and pressed, if that undead Lin Yuan summoned counted as one of his new followers. He admitted that the thing was downright majestic. Back in the heat of battle, the vulture darted swiftly behind the massive iguana. It triggered its backstab skill in a seamless motion, but the iguana instantly activated its impenetrable fortress, locking itself down. It retaliated by swinging its monstrous tail with crushing force. Lin Yuan warned the vulture to stay sharp and watch its back. But the creature failed to react in time and got slammed away, smashing hard into the wall. Han Qing commented on its insane reaction speed and pressed if that monster had eyes hidden on its back too. Lin Yuan also wondered aloud if it really did. He quickly retraced and analyzed the iguana's movements throughout the fight. He reflected that lizards had simple eye structures, relying mainly on light changes to sense threats. So if an enemy stayed perfectly still, spotting them became difficult. However, their motion detection was exceptional, and with sharp hearing and smell, they could catch even the faintest disturbance. Some lizard species even had infrared sensors to track body heat. Because of this, their sensitivity to enemy movement paths was vastly superior to that of humans. He concluded that the only way to handle the beast was to force it into trapping itself. Multiple fireballs slammed into the iguana in quick succession, blasting its body with violent bursts. Lin Yuan shouted that it should come at him and test whether its scales were tougher or his fireballs burned hotter. He hurled another fireball straight into it, striking true. The iguana roared, enraged, and barreled after him with feral fury. He figured this was perfect, riling it up so its entire focus would stay locked onto him. Han Qing suddenly called out sharply, warning that he was stepping into real danger. The defense of a boss-class iron-eating iguana was absurdly strong, and those fireballs couldn't pierce it at all, meaning his approach carried massive risk. But then Han Qing's gaze narrowed as he spotted where Lin Yuan was heading. He demanded if that was the pile of undead up ahead. Lin Yuan charged straight toward the undead iron-eating lizards with sharp focus tightening in his chest. He figured it was finally the right moment to strike and refused to hesitate. He abruptly skidded to a halt, dust scattering beneath his boots, before veering off in a sudden sharp turn. The iron-eating iguana faltered, baffled by his sudden change in trajectory. It scrambled to adjust its path, but its heavy body lurched awkwardly, and it stumbled, slamming directly into the cluster of lizards. Lin Yuan mocked it as a big dummy and jabbed if it didn't even know how to stop its own lumbering bulk. The iguana unleashed a furious roar that rattled the air. Lin Yuan taunted that it should savor the feast of explosions as he unleashed his corpse explosion art without hesitation. The iguana's scaled body cracked and burned as the eruptions tore into it with brutal force. Lin Yuan declared coldly that its armor had finally been breached. The iguana shrieked again, madness lacing its roar before hurling itself at him with killing intent. He vaulted into the air, springing high to avoid its snapping strike. From above, he called out to the vulture bandit lord, ordering it to swing wide to the left. He landed hard, muscles coiling, feet digging deep into the earth to gather explosive driving force. The vulture mirrored him perfectly, matching his maneuver without hesitation. He reasoned quickly that the beast's other weak point was its vision. It couldn't lock onto enemies from both sides at once. The vulture steadied its crossbow, readying for a deadly shot. Sensing danger, the iguana sucked in a deep breath, energy condensing in its gullet. Lin Yuan seized the fleeting chance and launched himself high above its head. The iguana's gaze snapped up, his reflected image flickering in its glossy, predatory eyes. He promised flatly that this strike would send it straight to hell. A sharp system chime confirmed he had struck a weak point and triggered an instant level up. It congratulated him for advancing cleanly to level 14 without delay. 5 minutes later, the Undead Legion's vitality surged back, its HP restored by a massive 85%. Lin Yuan had channeled his Dark Curse skill to pull off that recovery. He noted with a hint of satisfaction that using the skill scroll again would instantly push Dark Curse up to level 4. Even though Corpse Explosion Art had burned through countless undead, the gains from subjugating this beast made every loss worthwhile. He secured command over the level 20 undead iron-eating iguana master without contest. Lin Yuan stated coolly that from now on, this creature would serve as his shield. Han Qing suddenly called out, marveling that it was the first time he'd ever seen so much loot, and asked if they should start counting it right away. Lin Yuan brushed him off and questioned what the rush was, reminding him there were still rats scurrying around that hadn't been dealt with yet. All around them, scorched and mangled corpses of iron-eating lizards lay scattered across the battlefield. Zhao Kui scoffed at the fallen beasts, dismissing them as pathetic trash not even worth a glance. One guild member praised their leader's shrewd commands, boasting that with him at the helm, even a lord-class monster would have no choice but to kneel and take the beating. Another chimed in, pointing out that judging by the earlier chaos, the battle elsewhere should almost be finished, and if they moved now, they'd easily reap the spoils. Zhao Kui kicked one of the charred lizard carcasses with a grunt. He barked that it was time to move out and start collecting every corpse worth salvaging. Suddenly, the surrounding walls shattered violently with an echoing boom. Massive rocks tore free, plummeting so close they almost crushed the entire group. Zhao Kui's face twisted as he demanded to know who dared interfere, roaring at the unseen enemy for having the audacity to ambush the Black Tree Guild. Zhao Kui spotted Lin Yuan and Han Qing standing tall in front of him once the swirling dust finally cleared. Lin Yuan pressed him with a jab about not collecting the bodies and even tossed out that he'd come grab them himself. The mage snapped back that it was impossible, grumbling that the two of them should have been chewed up by the iron iguana. Han Qing fired right back, scoffing that he still had the gall to say that, and jabbed at how he once thought the Black Tree Guild was all about honor, only to see them shamelessly use players as bait to break into the dungeon. Another member chimed in without shame, declaring that it didn't matter, and that it was practically a privilege for trash like them to be the stepping stones for the Black Tree Guild. Meanwhile, Zhao Kui cursed in silence, fuming that those two had crawled out alive, and he kept wondering if maybe the cave they entered just didn't hold that many iron-eating iguanas and all the beasts had piled onto other unlucky fools instead. Han Qing blasted them again, spitting that they were utterly shameless. Zhao Kui, grinding his teeth, decided the guy was grating on him more and more, so he might as well just wipe him out. He sneered that they had no clue how lucky they'd been to crawl away alive. But then, he declared their streak of good luck had already run out. Lin Yuan told Han Qing to move back. Then he turned to Zhao Kui and pressed if it was just him standing there. Zhao Kui swung his weapon hard to intercept Lin Yuan's strike. The weapons collided in a thunderous crash, flinging rocks across the cavern like shrapnel. Lin Yuan slid backward across the ground, boots grinding dirt, and he blinked in surprise. Zhao Kui mocked him with a sneer, tossing out if that toy belonged to some brat still drinking from the bottle. Lin Yuan unleashed his skill, Azure Spirit Seal, without hesitation. Zhao Kui darted frantically in zigzags, dodging skulls that slammed down and blasted chunks of the ground into chaos. He managed to evade every strike until the very last one. His chest tightened in alarm when the smoke choked the cavern, and his vision went dark, and Lin Yuan was suddenly nowhere in sight. He cursed aloud, barking out where the hell he'd hidden. He snarled that Lin Yuan couldn't possibly think he was defenseless and spat that only an idiot would. For those who lived off dumb luck, he growled, it was smarter to sleep with one eye open. Lin Yuan stiffened when his sword struck air, realizing Zhao Kui had slipped away. The smoke cleared slowly, but Zhao Kui's figure had vanished completely. Lin Yuan's stomach dropped when he felt Zhao Kui's aura spike right behind him. Zhao Kui hissed that for a waste like him, life could be snuffed out at any second. Lin Yuan failed to dodge and took the strike straight on, the weapon exploding with aura that hurled him across the cavern. Han Qing shouted his name with panic, hurling out the title Abyssal God in desperation. The warrior declared he'd handle the rookie himself, but the mage cut in, scoffing if his warm-up wasn't enough and demanding his turn. Zhao Kui muttered he didn't have time to mess around with Lin Yuan. He ordered him to just lie down and die already. But to his shock, Lin Yuan caught his fist like it was nothing. Lin Yuan pressed him coolly, asking if he was the captain of the Black Tree Guild's third team. Zhao Kui's mind reeled, wondering how in hell this guy pulled that off. Lin Yuan grinned wickedly as a dark aura rolled off him. Terrifying glowing eyes materialized behind him like specters. He declared that now he had a pretty good picture of what the 10th ranked guild in the main city was really worth. Zhao Kui pushed with such reckless force that his arm shook uncontrollably, while he just casually gripped the fist like it weighed nothing to him. He groaned in agony when he twisted his arm without the slightest hesitation. He glared at him with eyes that burned sharp and threatening. He then hurled him down with brutal decisiveness. Zhao Kui slammed into the dirt right where his team clustered, and they all froze in shock. He spat out that he really underestimated him, cursing him as a bastard. He barked that they shouldn't just freeze up, they needed to rush in with him. The warrior roared his intent as he charged straight forward. The mage remarked with a sly grin that it was good. Zhao Kui barked that he should just rot in hell. He retorted coldly that a mob stays nothing but a mob, unworthy of action. Zhao Kui swung his weapon hard only to strike empty ground, while his two guildmates prepared their own strikes. Out of nowhere, two vulture bandits burst into the sky. Zhao Kui and his crew had no idea that they were hovering directly overhead. He flinched in shock when the vultures slammed his teammates flat into the ground. His face drained with terror when the azure spirit seal blazed, its eerie glow dancing in his eyes. The skulls charged at him, leaving him frozen in place, unable to move. The hit landed full force, blasting him up into the air. He then smashed back down, his face grinding into the dirt. He stood tall in front of him without a shred of pity. Zhao Kui stammered that he should wait, stop right there, and cursed that if he killed him, the Black Tree Guild wouldn't forgive it. So he'd better think twice. He looked down on him with a gaze dripping with condescension. He jolted in shock when he realized Han Qing clutched onto his leg. Han Qing addressed him as Abyss God, admitting with relief that he never backed down, and confessing he had been worried earlier. He ordered coolly that he should step aside. From what he knew, their Black Tree Guild bullied outsiders and devoured its own, and he pressed if he agreed they'd punish him viciously for losing equipment and levels, and if he even figured out how he'd explain it. Zhao Kui muttered bitterly that he was doomed already and demanded to know what he wanted so he could be spared. He told him bluntly to hand over a list of his guild's top management, with every detail on their classes and traits. He then suddenly recalled the first disciple, the memory flashing back, like a sharp jolt. He figured that in the last life, the techniques used by him were completely unheard of, with nobody recognizing them or knowing how to counter them, which made him certain the guy had some crazy rare hidden profession so secret that nobody even realized it existed. Back in the present, Zhao Kui pressed him on why he wanted that list. Lin Yuan jabbed his hand without giving him any straight answer. He demanded if Zhao Kui would write or refuse, and Zhao Kui blurted that he would write it right away. Moments later, Lin Yuan remarked that it looked like every master of the Black Tree Guild was present, and while there were a few oddball professions, not a single one matched the unique traits of that first disciple. Zhao Kui abruptly started calling him boss and begged him to let them off. Lin Yuan replied that he could let them go. Zhao Kui blurted his thanks, but then all three of them reeled when Lin Yuan's attack slammed into them. Lin Yuan declared that after hurting so many innocent players, they owed everyone an explanation. They vanished on the spot and dropped their gear. They dropped a silver-grade moon-covering hammer, a bronze-grade dancing sword, and a bronze-grade Lingguang robe. Lin Yuan's eyes then fell on Han Qing. Han Qing mentioned that he should check because they also pulled a treasure chest, and just like them, they hadn't sorted through it yet. Lin Yuan announced he would pick first and the leftovers were his, but Han Qing flatly refused. He insisted on buying it since he couldn't shamelessly take advantage of him. Lin Yuan muttered whatever. Finding nothing worth his while, he decided to pass everything to him, to which Han Qing agreed and promised to wire the money right away. And then the system chimed in that 54 gold coins had been credited. Not long after, they walked out of the Bloodscale Cave, and Lin Yuan reflected that, just as he suspected, the loot was still only silver gear, proving that snagging gold equipment in the current version was no easy feat. Han Qing then brought up that there was something he wasn't sure he should even say, and Lin Yuan prompted him to spit it out. Han Qing explained that he'd heard rumors the Black Tree Guild held grudges and would even seek revenge offline if they couldn't win in the game. So he suggested that Lin Yuan stick close to his bodyguard. Lin Yuan thanked him for the warning, but dismissed them as nothing more than bugs he already understood. Back in reality, Lin Yuan's mother called him out, telling him to get up and get ready for dinner. He responded that he was on his way. He reached out and twisted the doorknob to push open his door. But when it swung open, his father's towering frame filled the view, a gaming helmet strapped firmly to his head. Lin Yuan jolted with alarm, his nerves tightening in his chest. He lingered stiffly in front of his father, heavy with apprehension that made him fidget. His father tugged the helmet from his head with a deliberate motion. He pressed Lin Yuan to check if it wasn't exactly the helmet he needed for gaming and whether it had any damage. Lin Yuan admitted that it worked fine and showed no cracks, but he pressed back, curious why his father suddenly picked up a gaming helmet. His father denied buying it, and when Lin Yuan pushed what he planned to do with it, he explained his mother uncovered it while cleaning Lin Tan's room. Lin Yuan's memory flashed to his past life, recalling that around this very time, Lin Tan awakened her hidden class. He sank into the thought, letting it stew in his mind. Out of nowhere, his mother broke in, nudging the two men not to idle there and urging them to come quickly for dinner. The setting sun washed the city in glowing orange, pulling long shadows across the streets. Lin Yuan's mother remarked that his father didn't grasp these new gadgets, but always tried to find a way to connect with them. So he wasted the whole afternoon fumbling without even turning it on, though his father countered bluntly that it wasn't like that, and he should ignore her teasing since he only checked to make sure nothing of Lin Tan's got wrecked during her cleaning. Lin Yuan calculated that if he managed to bring his parents into the world of eternity, he could funnel resources to them in-game, and when the looming cataclysm struck, they'd at least hold power to guard themselves. He assured them the game wasn't complicated, so he'd grab 2 more helmets tomorrow, since his mom ought to try it too. She protested against wasting money, but he brushed it off, insisting she let him handle it, before turning the subject to whether Lin Tan had come home yet. She pointed out it was Friday, so she was surely out with her friends, and he should eat first while she would call later. But he declared he would call himself. His phone pinged back with a blunt notice that the user he dialed was temporarily unreachable. He puzzled over it, convinced that even if she ducked his call, she'd at least toss him a message out of courtesy rather than fully ignore him. His mother urged him to eat first, reminding him Lin Tan was likely dining outside, so they shouldn't hold dinner waiting for her. Lin Yuan remarked that they should get started first, since he planned on heading down to buy some things, muttering about how the store might shut if it got too late, and because his mother warned the food would go cold, his father pushed that she should just let him go. He pressed her on whether she remembered how Lin Yuan and Lin Tan used to stick together like glue, and admitted he didn't know when the gap between them had widened, so she ought to let them talk more. And she conceded he was right, that Lin Yuan was clumsy with his feelings. But after all, he was still the older brother. The hallway light flicked on as Lin Yuan stepped out. He moved steadily down the stairs. In that earlier life, Lin Tan returned home that night covered with injuries, flinching with every breath. Lin Yuan froze in shock the moment his eyes landed on her. He opened his mouth to question her, but she brushed straight past him. She snapped that it was none of his concern, warning him not to alert the police and not to breathe a word to their parents, demanding if he understood her. She slammed her door shut with a sharp crack. He kept silent, left only to stare at her bedroom door in helpless frustration. He recalled how in that former life, after Lin Tan began playing Eternity, she swiftly awakened her hidden class, but she also endured suffering that should never have touched her. All of it had begun with the sudden rise of that shadowy entity, the System Organization. It was a secretive force created by 9 Heavenly Chosen, and only the Heavenly Chosen held the right to step into the system. Within them, there existed a figure called the Prophet, capable of sensing Heavenly Chosen in reality, dispatching members to deliver invitations into the system. With chilling speed, the System Organization's strength grew unstoppable within the game. Beyond that, their grip reached further into the real world, and while their actions remained veiled and hard to read, they did lend a strange hand to keeping order in society, making their role baffling. After Lin Tan accepted their invitation, she frequently went out on perilous assignments, though she never breathed a word of the System Organization inside their home. He clung to the hope that this time it wasn't them. The door creaked with a drawn-out screech as he pushed it open. He vowed that even if it truly was them, he would never again let her stumble blindly into danger like before. He walked out of the apartment building, his face shadowed with a grim cast. Lin Yuan was strolling down the street with the single aim of tracking Lin Tan. All of a sudden, he caught sight of where she was hanging out. She sat tucked inside a cozy cafe with a group of people. He darted behind a wall in a hurry, trying to spy on them from a hidden spot. He muttered internally that sure enough, she had already met up with them. But the gap between them was too wide, and his ears couldn't catch their words clearly. though he also couldn't risk drawing their notice right now. He admitted to himself that he had gotten rusty from not using it for ages, so he forced his mind to lock in, then triggered his skill, invisibility. At this point, his invisibility stood at level 3, with a 5-minute time limit stamped on it. He came to a stop right after stepping inside the cafe. He reminded himself with a flicker of confidence that it should be enough. Lin Tan was in the middle of a talk with Xiao Pan and Hao Chen, who both sat across from her. Hao Chen addressed her as little sister, remarking that everything he wanted to tell her had already been put out, and whether she believed it or not was up to her judgment. He pressed that joining them wasn't just about the organization, because when disaster rolled in 3 years later, she would end up the same as them. They would rise for that world. A heavy silence stretched between both sides. Lin Yuan just stayed still, tuning in without interfering. Xiao Pan shot at Hao Chen that he ought to take a look at himself, since he had already scared the little girl and told him to reel in that suffocating aura of his. Hao Chen retorted that he was only talking about serious matters, and it was for her sake, since things had already gone that far. He was about to spell out what it involved, but his words were cut short. Lin Yuan jolted in shock when Hao Chen's gaze flicked toward his direction. Hao Chen's look carried pure suspicion. Lin Yuan's nerves tightened in surprise. Hao Chen then unleashed his skill, Dispel. The waves surged and blanketed the entire cafe. The system instantly pinged Lin Yuan that his invisibility effect had been shattered, with a countdown from 3 seconds. Hao Chen's eyes locked like lasers on the spot where Lin Yuan stood. He just stared at that direction, dead quiet, even though nothing visible was there. He casually threw at the barista why he hadn't told him earlier that herbal tea was on hand, then demanded a takeaway cup, which the barista acknowledged with a quick okay and asked him to hold a moment. He replied that it was coming. Meanwhile, Lin Yuan speculated whether Hao Chen had drawn on the Dispel skill tied to a ring equipment, consoling himself that at least the invisibility Dispel carried a 3-second lag. The system promptly notified him that the effect was gone. On the flip side, Hao Chen sipped down his tea. He called out to Lin Tan, pressing that he hoped she would weigh carefully whether to join them, people who bore justice in their veins as they refused to stay idle when disaster loomed. And once she had thought it through, she only had to call the number above. She responded with a yes. Xiao Pan chimed in, telling her that he would be waiting, his little beauty, so she had better come. Lin Yuan instantly reactivated his invisibility skill. He strode right past the barista to slip out of the cafe. Yet once outside, he muttered whether they had noticed something missing. As he roamed further, a cup of tea suddenly crashed at his feet. He froze, startled. The tea splattered all around on the ground, but the exact spot under his feet stayed bone dry. Hao Chen declared that sure enough, something was still off. The system then fired another alert to Lin Yuan that the invisibility effect would collapse in 3 seconds. Xiao Pan and Hao Chen both glared sharply toward where Lin Yuan lingered as the effect faded out. Lin Yuan was gone the instant the invisibility effect fizzled out, leaving nothing but empty air in front of them. Xiao Pan and Hao Chen froze in their spots, just soaking in the silence without a word. Hao Chen muttered that maybe he had been too on edge lately, brushing it off as nothing serious, while Xiao Pan insisted he was being jittery and needed to loosen up a bit, tossing in a casual question about whether he figured that girl would eventually join them. Hao Chen remarked that the prophet's forecast made it clear she would show up sooner or later, and Xiao Pan nodded along, claiming it lined up because those predictions had never failed yet. Though what really nagged at him was wondering which girl he'd end up flying wing to wing with. Hao Chen grimly remarked that his bigger concern was just making it through the looming disaster alive, while Xiao Pan countered with a shrug that it was still way too early for that. All the while, Lin Yuan balanced silently atop a tree branch, tracking them from afar as they drifted out of sight. He brooded that this crew was way trickier than he first imagined, and he mulled over the risk of slipping up if he lingered too long and let slip the truth of his forbidden class. He concluded bitterly that there was no real place left for him in the immortal world anyway, so every step needed extra care, and it felt like the right time to vanish elsewhere. Meanwhile, Lin Tan was clutching the business card she had been handed, her gaze locked on it like it held answers. She abruptly shot out a question to Lin Yuan, demanding to know what brought him there. He replied lightly that he only came down to grab something, and then casually asked if she had eaten yet. She admitted she hadn't, but brushed it off, claiming she was fine. He told her she shouldn't stay buried in work that late, mentioned he had picked up food, and suggested she'd check if anything caught her appetite once they got home. She frowned and sighed, thinking this guy barely managed himself, so why was he bothering to look after her? He cut the moment short by saying they should just head back home. She blinked in a daze, tongue-tied and unable to respond. Not long after, the pair returned, voices overlapping as they announced their arrival. Their mother remarked that Lin Tan must have lost track of time while playing, and asked if she'd eaten yet, offering to warm something up, but Lin Tan brushed it off, saying she didn't need it and just wanted to rest. Their mother then noted Lin Yuan hadn't eaten properly either, and promised to fix more food for him. Lin Tan quietly retreated into her room and shut the door tight. She let out a heavy sigh, her chest tight with restless thoughts. She mulled over how things had gone completely strange lately. She admitted that ever since she started playing that game, bizarre events had piled up non-stop. Her memory dragged her back to when she and her friend had been hacking away at monsters side by side. Her friend urged her to bolt, reminding her she was faster, and promised to hold the beasts at bay. They had been locked against level 5 longsword mantises, a nasty matchup. Her friend screamed as she stumbled, and a mantis lunged to cleave her down from behind. Lin Tan barked that she should run on ahead while she took the stand herself. She was the front line, and no front line ever ditched the back row, so the burden had to rest on her shoulders. With that conviction, she threw herself straight into the swarm of mantises while her friend bolted. One mantis slashed at her with hooked claws, and she caught it on her blade, steel clashing hard. But another slid behind her quicker than she expected, swinging its claws straight into her back. Her scream tore out raw as the blow struck clean and vicious. The system instantly chimed in, congratulating her for unlocking a hidden class. She groaned in agony, surrounded and drowning in mantises, while the system declared that her awakening had begun. She roared back with defiance, hurling her sword through sweeping arcs. Her movements sharpened, flowing faster, and one mantis toppled after another under her strikes. Her cry rose again as she swung with everything she had left, cutting them down with sheer ferocity. Moments later, she jammed her blade into the earth, leaning on it as her strength waned, her breath ragged, and the mantises littered the ground lifeless around her. The system finally announced her new class with finality, Sword of Dawn. Lin Tan figured the feeling was real, noticing how her body shifted in the real world too. She wondered if she could protect everyone if a disaster really struck like they said. She wondered if she could actually pull that off. She wondered if anyone could survive, if even that kind of power couldn't hold back the disaster. She asked herself whether she would join them or not. She decided she had to get strong fast because she wanted to protect them. Meanwhile, Lin Yuan stared at the same family photo. He figured he couldn't delay things anymore. His focus needed to stay on the game, and he couldn't stay on guard forever. So it was time to let them live comfortably. The next day, an agent greeted Lin Yuan. She checked if he was coming to look at the house that day. He asked if she had a fully furnished villa and mentioned it needed tight security. The agent figured he looked too young, and while wondering if he was actually rich, she pressed if he even knew how much their property cost. He admitted he hadn't checked, but he figured it would be enough. She examined his card. She confirmed it was a limited edition VIP card with at least tens of millions deposited, and called him her god of wealth. She instantly welcomed him home, declaring that employee number 2345 would be dedicated to him. Later, Lin Yuan's mother checked if she heard him right. She pressed if he was saying this was their new home. She pointed at the private pool, saying it looked like the ones on TV. So fancy, it almost stunned her. At the same time, Lin Yuan's father questioned if the bed was too big. The two of them stood amazed as they toured the house. Lin Yuan's mother asked how long it would take him to finish paying for the mortgage or if they should move back, and his father agreed, saying they didn't want him under too much pressure. Lin Yuan explained that there was no mortgage since he'd bought it outright using his competition winnings and gaming income, so they could live there peacefully while he stayed next door, focusing on his games. His father admitted he never imagined living in a villa in his lifetime, saying he owed his fortune to his son, while his mother remarked that her boy had grown up and could stand on his own before she even noticed. Lin Yuan smiled. Moments later, Lin Yuan figured there was nothing to worry about regarding the villa's safety. He walked the streets alone. He decided the next step was to get his parents into gaming too and keep an eye out for any order organizations. He tensed up instantly. Zhao Qi announced he finally caught what he'd been hunting. It had taken forever to find him. He was so furious the veins bulged across his bald head. Lin Yuan guessed he was the captain of the Black Tree Guild he'd taken down. Zhao Qi lunged forward without warning. He barked if Lin Yuan wasn't such a hotshot and mocked that he should try acting like one offline. Another guild member shouted to bash his head in, and another jeered that he was frozen with fear. One of them declared that anyone who dared disrespect Mr. Kratos was courting death. Lin Yuan activated his invisibility and remarked that they were too slow. The member froze when he vanished before their eyes. Lin Yuan then closed in and rushed Zhao Qi. He slammed a punch into his gut so hard the man coughed up blood. He cleared out the rest on his way to him. Zhao Qi questioned if he was even human or some kind of ghost. He flinched when Lin Yuan jammed a pipe into the ground right beside his head. Lin Yuan remarked that it seemed he didn't value his life and muttered that these nuisances just wouldn't quit. Zhao Qi begged him to wait, admitting he was wrong, pleading for his life, saying he could still be useful. He knew about a hidden mission. Lin Yuan told him to keep talking. Zhao Kui mentioned that in the main city he'd met a blacksmith named Tongs had been running ore deliveries for him, and when the favor got high enough, the guy promised to craft a piece of gold gear. Lin Yuan recalled that someone had managed to snag gold gear fast in his previous life, and rumor tied it to some unremarkable NPC. So maybe that guy hadn't lied, but he pressed him if it was legit. He crushed the pipe in his hand barehanded. He warned that he'd better not pull anything stupid, since there were plenty of ways to deal with people both online and off. If he touched his family, that'd be his fate. Zhao Kui replied that he got it. By evening, Lin Yuan headed to the Moonlight Night Tavern in the Western Desert's main city to find Tongs. The crowd there was drinking hard. Some were working through a warm meal. Tongs eyed him, repeated that he claimed to bring 100 chunks of ore, and scoffed that, with skin that clean, he clearly wasn't built for mining. But if he actually pulled it off, he'd forge him a weapon free. Lin Yuan figured Zhao Kui hadn't lied after all, so next up was mining. Out of nowhere, he spotted a guy hassling a woman, saying she should drink with him, while she told him to back off since she didn't even know him. She told him not to touch her, and the man laughed that he wouldn't if she just came along. Lin Yuan stood still and didn't intervene, but the guy turned on him, asking what he was staring at, and warning he'd poke his eye out if he didn't back off. Lin Yuan remarked that he really didn't know how to live or die. The woman called him a handsome little brother, thanked him, and offered to buy him a drink. He refused. She teased that he shouldn't walk away so fast. Her heel caught, and she stumbled. He noticed instantly and caught her before she fell. She grinned and asked if he liked dancing, saying she did too. He muttered that she was trouble. Moments later, Lin Yuan rented a room. He let her sleep it off there and left quietly. Soon after, he made his way to the Viper Mine. He used his kobold summons to dig. He figured the 12 of them stored in his netherworld gate were perfect miners and would rake in plenty fast. Then, an explosion rocked the tunnel behind him. Level 10. Violent moles burst out attacking. Lin Yuan ordered the scorpion to go wipe them all before they ran. The scorpion lunged, shredding through the moles. After a while, every one of them lay dead on the ground. Lin Yuan noted that adding more monster types would round out his tactics nicely. The moles rose again, turning into his undead summons. But then, a heavier blast erupted. He demanded to know what it was. A level 16 violent mole lord was chasing Old Sun. The man sprinted toward Lin Yuan with the beast right behind him. Lin Yuan asked if that was the mine boss and muttered that someone was definitely luring monsters on purpose. Old Sun kicked off his skill. He aimed it straight at Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan instantly shifted his footing. He darted out of range, but the thing chased him anyway. He wondered if the move was locked onto him. Then the system pinged that Old Sun had cast holy armor on him, and he mentioned it was a priest's buff. Another player blurted out what was going on, why the iron ore had vanished if that priest was from the super god Iron Triangle, and why he was running solo. He muttered that he'd better rush to snag some traffic. Old Sun, on the other hand, claimed he hadn't meant to pull monsters and told him to bolt because he was on his own for this mess. At that time, there were 15 folks online, and one of them griped if all the priests in Mirror Flower Water Moon Guild were wild enough to solo bosses. Another teased that priest moved like an assassin. Someone else shouted that the battle priest had arrived. Lin Yuan remarked that he was still pretty loyal in that mess, mentioning he'd just bought a villa and dropped a lot of cash, so he'd gladly take a boss walking up to his door. Over at the stream, viewers shot up to 130, and one wondered why the guy looked familiar. Another exclaimed it was that master who soloed the world boss, telling everyone to stay tuned because things were about to get good. And when he complained the master wasn't acting yet, he urged him to move. Meanwhile, the mole was about to sink its claws into Old Sun, but Lin Yuan intercepted with his sword. Old Sun demanded who he was. At the same time, Zhao Kui watched the stream. He cursed and barked that it wasn't shameful losing to that beast. Suddenly, Nuyan grumbled that the net was flooded again with praise for that so-called great god, whining about the non-stop hype, while his companion scoffed, who claimed otherwise, and boasted no one could match their president's moves. Zhao Kui pointed out it was Nuyan from the Fury Guild, and said he'd seen that stream too. Honestly, the Mad God only rode on the guild's strength and class advantage, but purely by skill, no one matched that great god. Nuyan snapped at him to repeat that. Zhao Kui pressed if he was really Nuyan from the Fury Guild, and told him to check because it wasn't just him. Everyone in the comments praised that guy too. Some even claimed Quang Shen, as Feng Jisha's top guild leader, should have stepped down already. He froze when Nuyan leveled his blade at his throat. Nuyan demanded what in the hell he was supposed to be, and Zhao Kui shot back what good it did to vent on him when everyone said the same, then added that the Mad God was just too low-key. After all, when there are no heroes, the young ones shine. Nuyan growled if that guy was still streaming, and Zhao Kui confirmed, still in the mine. Nuyan ordered the guild to be notified and told everyone online to follow him. Meanwhile, Lin Yuan unleashed a flurry of sword slashes at the mole. He called out that Old Sun could leave now since the creature's hatred was locked on him. Sure enough, the mole lunged straight at him. The blow hit so hard its claws tore deep into the ground. Lin Yuan dodged fast and widened the gap. He then hurled his fireballs. The mole shrieked as the blast scorched it full on. Back on the stream, viewers had climbed to 1,297, and one shouted they had to study it frame by frame. Another gushed that the master's moves were flawless and that monster's hatred never wavered. Another joked they were getting double vision, and someone else marveled that the master had endless tricks and insane power. Meanwhile, the mole yanked its claws free. It then barreled toward Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan quickly summoned his wolves. They swarmed and clamped onto the mole, pinning it down. Lin Yuan warned that if it kept raging blindly and ignored the threat behind it, it would pay dearly. Not that it needed to get the message. He drove his sword straight into its eye.